I'd like to call the City of Apache Junction Council meeting of August 1st, 2023 to order and ask everyone to put their phones on silence. The invocation will be led by Vice Mayor Schroeder and pledge by Councilman Heck.
Dear God, thank you for the opportunity to bring us all together to do the city's business on behalf of its residents. We thank you for the rain we've received over the past few days. We know it was much needed. We ask that you put a watchful hand over our first responders, our fire, police, paramedics, and please us over our men and women in military. In God's name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mayor Wilson,
Here.
Vice Mayor Schroeder,
Present.
Councilmember Cross,
Here.
Councilmember Heck,
Here.
Councilmember Johnson,
Here.
Councilmember Nesser,
Present.
Councilmember Soller.
Here.
You have a quorum, Your Honor.
Thank you. As a reminder, all items in the consent agenda will be approved with one motion. If a council member wishes to remove an item for further discussion, the request must be made prior to approving the consent agenda and be moved to new business. Do I have a motion?
Your Honor,
Yes.
I move that the consent agenda be approved and accepted as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Councilmember Soller,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schroeder,
Yes.
Councilmember Nesser,
Yes.
Councilmember Cross,
Yes.
Councilmember Heck,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Mayor Wilson.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Regional intergovernment updates. Does anyone have anything they want to bring up? 4th of July was a good opportunity. Well, I have one thing I wanted to bring up, and that is this morning we did the, I'll say, removing and recognizing the new art that was brought into the dog park. This is a picture in the lower bottom is the artist, and he is presenting me the, well, the one that was sitting up here.
Yeah, where'd it go?
There, just set it right in front of me. And he presented that to the city and basically saying thank you for allowing him to do the art. They're quite big, very colorful, and everyone that saw them enjoyed them. And it was a unique situation. And of course, this is part of our, I'll say, art commission had selected him, and that's one of the ones that we had set up, a committee that we had set up to actually select some of the art because we're wanting to have a little more art in our community. Okay, manager's report.
Thank you, Your Honor. Bryant Powell, City Manager, and just super proud that this is our a year ago first off-leash dog park in the city. It's historic, significant. It means a lot. Same with this is our very first effort, and we'll get better as we do it, and able to do public art. And there was a real neat ceremony today. So for my report, I have a couple items, and then we have that we have with us the Executive Director of MAG, Maricopa Association of Governments here, and we'll do that. But first up is our summer reading program is just really taken off. Pam and her team over at the library are just doing tremendous work. We're up 20% this year. You may recall a couple of years back you invested in a program room, and it allows for the space for people to come in and do these great programs. Here's some of the numbers. Preschoolers logged 8,400 books. And then children and youth have been really a big part of this programming that Pam's done, and work really hard in our community to make connections, and your effort and your library staff are doing all they can to make those connections. Another opportunity for our residents to come in and connect at our library, a little emphasis, is our local United States Postal Service is looking for folks to hire. And what better way than to have them come over to our library and get details and information on how folks can be employed right here in their local community doing great work. So wanted you to be aware of that. We, along with many employers, are doing our very best to hire the best talent we can. It's a unique time in our economy where it's not as many folks are out working or looking for jobs. And so we're doing all we can to help support different groups in our city. I would now, like to turn, now we've got some information here on some air quality work that we need to be up to speed on. But before we do that, I'd like to turn the time over to Ed Zuercher, who is the new, maybe not so new, he'll introduce that part, Executive Director of Maricopa Association of Governments. Ed?
Thank you, Bryant. Thank you, Mayor Wilson. Members of the council, it's good to be here. As Bryant said, my name is Ed Zuercher. I am the Executive Director of Maricopa Association of Governments, known as MAG, which is the regional planning agency for the region. Just a little bit about MAG. There are 32 member agencies of MAG, which Apache Junction is one. That is all the cities and towns in Maricopa County itself, our 3 native nations, Fort McDowell, Salt River Pima, and Gila River. And then we also have members from Pinal County, including Pinal County itself. And there are 6 Pinal County members, although like Apache Junction, Queen Creek straddles both Maricopa and Pinal counties. But the Gila River Indian community as well, Florence, and the town of Maricopa. So MAG is its member agencies. Mayor Wilson serves on our regional council, and Apache Junction sits as an equal member to all other 31 agencies that are part of the Maricopa region. It is a large region if we think about it. MAG, the boundaries of the agencies of MAG cover over 10,000 square miles, which would make us as large or a little larger actually than the state of New Jersey. And the population is almost 5 million. Which means if MAG were a state, the MAG region were a state, we'd be the 25th largest state in the United States. So the magnitude of what we're dealing with here in the region is significant. MAG does two purposes. One, it was created as a planning organization required by the federal government for any region that gets federal highway funds. Back in the 60s, it was stated that there had to be a planning agency for an entire region. And so the reason why any of the agencies in the region are able to get federal highway funds is because an agency like MAG is created and does the planning for that. The other function that MAG creates is a council of governments. As I said, Mayor Wilson sits on that council of governments on behalf of you all, where the regional governments get together to deal with what I call problems without borders. So it's things like transportation planning, air quality, which it doesn't matter if you're in Apache Junction or Mesa or Surprise, the air doesn't know where the border is, it just goes where it goes. More recently, we've gotten into doing some planning on human services to help our member agencies with homelessness issues that are affecting them. And so we're helping to do planning on that. And then we do regional data gathering so that there's, one place, there's one place for a lot of the data about development and building permits and all that stuff, which MAG pulls together. So it's a real pleasure for me. As Bryant said, I just started in March, and effective July 1st, the previous executive director retired, and so I'm now the executive director. This marks the first day of my second month of that, I guess. So it's a privilege to be here. Last month I was with the council in Surprise. The month before that I was with the council in Fountain Hills. So I am slowly making my way around. I met with Mayor Wilson in June, I think it was, with Supervisor Goodman and some other Pinal County cities to talk about transportation plans in Pinal County. MAG staff are doing some work in transportation planning on behalf of some of the agencies in Pinal County as we're trying to work out your fast growth here to make sure it's coordinated. One good piece of good news we thought was that yesterday the state legislature passed, and this morning the governor signed legislation allowing the voters of Maricopa County to vote for the extension of the sales tax that provides transportation in Maricopa County, known as Prop 400, the Prop 400 extension. Had a lot of conversation about it, but at the end of the day, it was a plan developed by all the mayors and leaders of all the 32 agencies, unanimously adopted and brought forward. In negotiation with the legislature, we did make some changes to accommodate the requests of the legislature, and was successfully adopted yesterday, and as I said, signed by the governor this morning. So that brings resources for the next 20 years, as it has provided resources for Maricopa County for the last 40 years. So the big projects in the freeways like the 60 and the 202, those have been funded by Prop 400. There's transit in there. There's also streets and arterials. So I just asked my staff, what are some of the things that have happened for Apache Junction from transportation planning? A couple of it from Proposition 400 funds have happened, but others come to you because as we plan the federal funds, your staff is in there advocating for Apache Junction and what you need. And so we've had funding on the Broadway Avenue to 16th Avenue Bridge Project, Tomahawk Road, US 60 to Southern Avenue Bridge projects. You've been funded for sidewalk and bike projects, the Apache Junction Active Transportation Plan, several design assistance projects, some street sweepers that do help with PM10 air quality, and then, as I said, some big freeway projects like US 60 Meridian, Loop 202 widening of the Red Mountain and Santan sections that all, again, feed the transportation network that helps build a community like Apache Junction. So there is a tremendous amount of activity that goes on. Brian is one of our strong leaders on the management side, and I said, again, Mayor Wilson serves on our regional council. We were asked to come here this evening to talk to you about, it sounds like a science class, and I did not do well in science, but I'm learning a lot from our director, Tim Franquist, about air quality. When we think about air quality, mostly we think about the brown cloud, which has a lot to do with particulates, and that's what the street sweepers help with. We've made tremendous progress in the region on particulate matter through a lot of efforts of paving dirt roads and sweeping streets and doing those sorts of things. Where we as a region now are really struggling is in ozone, and Tim Franquist, our environmental manager, is going to talk to you about that. Now, ozone has an issue related to public health, but we'll talk about what this means. So I'm going to just give you the bottom line, then Tim's going to give you some details. The region has been designated by the federal government as a moderate non-attainment area. We are not in compliance with the standards for ozone, and that's a problem that has some implications that we'll talk about. And we're moving in the wrong direction, so we're within about 18 months of being categorized instead of moderate as serious, and that has some consequences that impact not only public health but our economic development. Ozone is an issue, first of all, and it's in the Clean Air Act, which was adopted by the Nixon administration, because it's about public health, and we'll talk about what it does. Things like roadway and transit investments that were in Prop 400 extension are really important for us trying to get to be in compliance or in attainment for ozone. So that's why one of the reasons why Proposition 400 extension was so important is it helps in this regard. And even with that, though, we still need to find ways to reduce the amount of things that go in the air that create ozone, and Tim will talk to you a little bit about the science of ozone in a second, so that we can avoid federal sanctions. We also, however, need to pursue, hopefully not legal action, but we may get to that point, but at least engagement through our senators, particularly with the EPA. So who does what? It is the Clean Air Act, as I said, sets the law. So this is federal law we're complying with. It is not MAG creating it. It's nothing that we picked to do. It was set up through the federal government Clean Air Act from the 1970s. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, they set the rules based on the law that we have to follow. Maricopa Association of Governments, we are the air quality planners. We have to set the plans to make sure that we comply with what the EPA says that the Clean Air Act tells us to do. Maricopa and Pinal County separately have environmental quality departments. They put rules in place, like in the Maricopa County side, I'm not sure on the Pinal side, we have to go get our cars, if they're a certain age, you have to go get your car engine checked to make sure its emissions are in compliance. That's one of the things that Maricopa County and Pinal County have put in place as a result of EPA standards, among other things. And then the state of Arizona also has statewide rules that the ADEQ has to do. Talked a little bit about the MAG region, and with that, I'm going to turn this over to our Environmental Director, Tim Franquist, who will walk you through what it is, what it means, and then what it is that we have to do. Because again, it does have significant impacts on desires for economic development projects, a lot in the East Valley and into Pinal County as well. So with that, I'll introduce Tim. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ed. Mayor, council members, we'll go ahead and kind of jump into, as Ed was saying here, the science of this. So apologize that this late in the evening we're going to get into some more complicated subject matter, but as we do that, if you have any questions at all, please do stop me and we'll jump into that. So kind of piggybacking off what Director Zuercher was mentioning here about the size of our area. So what we can see up here is the MAG planning region in blue. And what we can see here is what's referred to as the non-attainment area. So this is the area that's not meeting the health-based standard for ozone. As Ed mentioned, it's a very large planning region, but if we look at this region here, this is almost the size of the state of Connecticut. Why that's important is because back east, when we started dealing with air quality issues, we're dealing with counties that are actually the size of counties or planning areas that are the size of planning areas. Here in our planning area, we're actually on a Connecticut size type problem. So what does that mean? We have more sources, we have more municipalities, just more challenges at almost at a state level. So how does ozone form? So here's kind of the science of it. So there takes two components and then sunlight. So the first component is volatile organic compounds. That comes from things like nature, wildfires, solvents, gasolines, things of that nature. That has to combine with oxides of nitrogen. That's typically fossil fuel combustion, so that comes from mostly vehicles in our area, and stationary sources or fixed sources. And those two chemicals have to react in the presence of sunlight. So this is the key for our area. So it's not heat per se, it's actually the ultraviolet radiation from the sunlight that actually drives this reaction. We know in our valley here we get something in the neighborhood of 330 days of sunlight, so unfortunately this is the perfect chemistry for ozone. So we need that volatile organic compounds with the oxides of nitrogen, like I say, in the presence of sunlight, and that creates our ozone. So first and foremost, we'll get into a lot of talking about permitting and economics, but first and foremost, as Ed had referred to, it is a public health standard. EPA does go through a process of looking at these different chemicals and determining what is the right standard for public health. So in terms of ozone, it can cause things like asthma, exacerbate COPD, actually induce asthmatic attacks. Those days where we feel our eyes watering, that's asthma actually doing that. The burning or scratchy throat, again, that's all the ozone that's actually causing that. And then it actually can make your lungs more susceptible to pre-existing issues. So in light of COVID, which obviously attacks the lungs, again, this can make you more susceptible to those type of illnesses. So where do we sit on, in terms of standards? So Ed had mentioned that when we don't meet a health-based standard, we get slotted in a certain category. So in the today, we're dealing with the 2015 ozone standard. That's a 70 parts per billion standard. There's different classifications. We'll talk just in a second what those are, but we are at moderate. So it starts at marginal. We're at the next level at moderate. When we look at measured concentration, so that's what we're looking here at 2021. So the 80 parts per billion is what I usually refer to as the air that we're breathing. This does include things like wildfires, so other impacts to our air quality. The 75 parts per billion, we are allowed to remove wildfires for the purposes of planning, because obviously we can't control wildfires. So we have a planning number somewhere around 75. In 2002, unfortunately, that number upticked. The air that we're breathing was around 81 parts per billion. And then if we remove those wildfires, we're at about 77 parts per billion. This is a real big challenge for us because emissions are actually dropping in the region. So we'd obviously expect concentrations to go with it. But we're actually seeing this uptick. So we're investigating what's actually causing this. We do know we get impacted by emissions from outside the area. So it's something that we're investigating right now. So in terms of classification, so as I stated earlier, we start off at marginal. Again, probably the reason we haven't heard a whole bunch about ozone and non-attainment in our region, Not a lot is required here from the EPA at marginal. We don't see a lot of laws go into effect, but it does trigger a new air quality permitting regime called emission offsets. And we'll talk a bit about those in just a second. But again, since we don't see a lot of rules, we don't see a lot of changes, we don't hear too much about marginal. We have 3 years to attain that standard. If that doesn't happen, we do get bumped up into a moderate. And again, it's probably why we start to see the conversation elevate around moderate. This is where we do have to come up with different rules called reasonable available control measures, and these can be pretty significant. The emission offsets that we'll talk about in just a second, those increase. So again, this is where I think we tend to start having a lot more conversations around moderate. We are on the fast track, as Ed was saying, to the serious non-attainment, and I think this is the real crux of the conversation, is this breakpoint between moderate and serious in terms of air quality permitting and emission offsets is significant. The permitting threshold at this point gets chopped in half, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it has some pretty significant impacts to our local economy. In 3 years, if we don't attain that standard, it's serious. We get bumped to severe and then on up the ladder. Severe and extreme is a lot where we see California. So when we start talking about reasonable available control measures, you do hear a lot about California, and it's mainly because they have set the floor, if you will, for reasonable available control measures. Again, not that we're trying to emulate California, it's just they kind of the only ones in kind of the serious and severe categories. So where do we sit in terms of measured concentration? So as Ed alluded to, the EPA sets the ozone standard as they do for 5 other criteria pollutants. By law, they have to take a look at that every 5 years under the Clean Air Act. The standards don't change every 5 years, but you can see that they do change relatively frequently. So we can see the 97 standard there, 2008, and then 2015. And for the last several decades, we've actually been doing a really remarkable job as referring to real significant decreases in PM10, but we've also had real significant decreases in ozone as well until just about that 2018. And again, this is what I say is a real head scratcher. So when we look at the actual emissions in the area, what's referred to as the emissions inventory, we actually do see emissions going down in our area, but you can see from the graph here, for whatever reason, we are increasing emissions. That darker blue line we can see on the top, that is actually with wildfires, so we can see a pretty significant uptick there. And then with those wildfires removed, we can see that green line. That's actually, again, we can see that uptick in just about 2021. So where does that leave us? Well, that leaves us about a 7 parts per billion delta between where we need to be and where we need to go. It's a pretty significant challenge. I'd say it's not insurmountable, but I think we've been candid that it's a pretty large delta that we got to overcome. And I think one of the things that we heard in legislature just a couple weeks ago from the Arizona State Chamber of Commerce is this idea of us going together on this, where it's not just MAG leading the effort or AZ Chamber leading the effort or Arizona Department of Environmental Quality leading the effort, but I think this is the opportunity to have the conversation for us to really rally around this, because that 7 parts per billion, again, it's a significant challenge, but one I think we can take on together. So in terms of, is this just a local problem? Well, what we can see up here in the little orange dots, those represent air quality monitors in the region. I would say almost all of those are actually not attaining the standard. So you can see it's a pretty good scatter shot throughout the valley. And so this is just simply to represent that our ozone issue is just not a downtown Phoenix issue, downtown Scottsdale issue, but as referring to, ozone unfortunately knows no jurisdictional boundaries and does kind of move out through the valley, so we do see a regional challenge with ozone. So what have we been doing about ozone? Well, nothing short of a lot of different measures. So what you can see here is we have 93 different ozone measures in place. You're probably familiar with a lot of them, the vehicle emission testing program. Most folks are subject to that. Vehicle tailpipe standards, that comes from the federal government. Emission standards on large facilities. Coordinated traffic signals, again, where we tie in our transportation and air quality planning. Clean burning fuels, that's why we see the price of gasoline switch about this time of year. But even with those 90 control measures in and working, we're not likely to meet that 2024 deadline. So what does that mean in terms of deadline? So the August 2024, as Ed referred to earlier, that's the deadline that we're working with now. Now, what I would tell you is that we're having challenges already this season. We've had several exceedances of the ozone standard. So again, when we say we're not likely to meet the standard, it would take a hope and a miracle, I think, to actually get there. And this is why we really want to start elevating that conversation, is this break point between moderate and serious has pretty significant impacts on our local economy, and we'll talk a little bit about the air quality permitting that goes along with that. In 2027, we have 3 years to attain that standard. If we don't, again, not to be an alarmist, not to throw our neighbor California under the bus, but again, this is where we start to see California level controls right somewhere around the severe category. So again, we really just want to get the word out that we get ourselves into compliance, hopefully by this 2027 deadline to hopefully have to miss any of these much more stringent control measures that we see under severe. All right, so switching gears here, we're going to get a little bit into the air quality permitting. So from an economic development standpoint, why is the air quality issue so important? Well, in a non-attainment area, if you're a new source, a very large source in the today, where you make a modification to your existing source over a certain level, you have to get what's referred to an emission offset. And the best way to think about this is neutralizing the emissions that you put in the air plus some. So a 100-ton polluter in the today has to remove 115 tons before they're allowed to operate. They can do that a couple different ways. They can do that through a private transaction, so a company to company can figure out what those emission reductions were, or they can go to the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. They have an emissions bank. They can purchase credits from there. But they have to get the permit, get the offset credits, go through the whole process before they can even begin to operate. So you can see that that's probably a pretty big challenge for a company looking to locate in our area. So let me give a real world example. Oh, excuse me. So let me talk a little bit about the threshold. So why is that threshold so important? Well, in the today, the emission offset threshold, you can see there's 100 tons per year. So for our area, that's a very large source. That's a new gas-powered plant, a concrete plant. It's a very large source. Under Sirius, what we can see here is these are our run-of-the-mill facilities. These are normal rock products facilities, concrete batch plants, our data centers. We do a lot of these 50-ton per year data centers. So this is why we say this is such a huge challenge and a good reason for us to have the conversation now at this breakpoint between moderate to serious, is that threshold for air quality permitting gets cut in half right there. Under severe, you can see it gets cut half again, and then extreme again. So again, this is why we really want to elevate the conversation here. So the faster we can get back into compliance, better for public health and the environment, but certainly good for our economy as well. So here in terms of, a local example. So if we're in a serious non-attainment area, that threshold is 50 tons per year. Say take a major microchip manufacturer at 90 tons per year. So this is kind of a real world scenario. In a serious non-attainment area, they would have to find 108 tons per year to offset those emissions before they even begin to operate. A data center, we were seeing a lot of these come in hot and heavy there for a while. It's just slowed down a little bit, but again, kind of that 50 ton per year facility is kind of our core of our economy. And under a serious non-attainment scenario, we're looking at 60 tons per year. Unfortunately, in the serious categorization, it's not that these facilities don't likely come to Arizona, but it's going to be very, very hard for them to come to a non-attainment area. So what ends up happening is they tend to locate outside. So there's probably a reason why we see a lot of movement in Casa Grande, Maricopa, those areas outside the non-attainment area. So unfortunately, what we normally see is that standard gets changed again. The area gets expanded, and so we're always kind of chasing both the standard and the size. So again, the faster we can return to compliance, better for public health and the environment and the economy. So why is that such a big issue in terms of emission offsets? Is our area actually has no emission offsets. So unlike California or Texas, which are very large, heavy industrial areas, they tend to generate these credits just by a natural coming and going of business. Our area is a new economy. We don't have the heavy industry like most areas that's happening. This is why it's such a challenge, is this could actually stifle that. So in the today, this is why this is such a huge issue for us, that we simply don't have any emission offsets to permit any new or expanded business. So just a quick summary, in the today, this emission offsets only impact mostly large businesses. Under a serious non-attainment scenario, this will impact most businesses in our area. The emission offsets actually escalate as we go up that classification ladder, and there are no emission offsets in our region. So that has pretty significant implications to any new businesses that want to locate in our area or an existing business that wants to make an expansion. So where does our ozone come from? So this is a bit of a shocking slide. So what we can see here is most of our ozone comes from outside the area. So what we can see in that gray there is what we refer to as local controllability. So what that means is we get a lot of international transport. We get interstate transport from California. We get wildfires. So the unfortunate reality of this scenario is what we can see there in the colored is this is the part of the pie that local regulators have to work with. So you can see that's actually shrinking pretty significantly. The other issue with that is you can see the 8.6 there in the green, that represents vehicles. Only California and the EPA can set a tailpipe standard, so the state and federal government, or excuse me, the state and local governments can't really impact that local category unless we're looking at things like transit, public transit, things of that nature. So the upshot there is that we just have a very small piece of the pie to work with. And so again, is this a downtown Phoenix issue? Again, we can see the monitoring network here. This is a monitor that we have out in Tonto National Park by Roosevelt. And again, this one here is not attaining the standard. And the same thing, you can see that the source category is very similar in terms of what's impacting the monitor. So some pretty good news today. I think it's coming out of the Prop 400. So in terms of the Prop 400 impacts, the transit actually obviously gives us a pretty good air quality benefit in terms of buses and public transit. The important upshot, and I think the real positive takeaway earlier this week, that without the transit projects associated with Prop 400, we would have to find additional regulatory programs to backfill the benefits that we would have got from Prop 400 extensions, particularly the transit projects. I think really good news this week. However, without those transit projects, obviously we'd have to have additional regulatory programs. Again, how significant is the transit to the air quality? You can see here the Prop 400 extension, very, very significant projects in terms of congestion mitigation, funding public transit. So no small amount of effort and resources there. So again, these congestion mitigations actually really help us reduce emissions. Next big question usually is how expensive is ozone? And we can see here, again, those first years, it's about $500,000, but we see in moderate, serious, severe, and extreme. So right now in moderate, what we would calculate is that we're being impacted by about $107 million per year into our local economy when we're in non-attainment. In serious, where we can see is that jumps up to about $250 million a year that impacts our local economy, and it continues to double. Looking at two more recent studies, one in Corpus Christi and one in Oklahoma City, again, the numbers come out to about the same, several $100 million a year. Oklahoma City is saying that ozone's costing them up to close to $1 billion a year. So again, not cheap for us to be in. And how do we calculate those costs? Well, one is those air quality permits and the pollution control equipment that comes with it. It's expensive. Some businesses may choose not to locate in our area because of those emission offsets, so avoided or missed business opportunities. Stringency in the pollution control, so there's many different things that go into that calculation, but the bottom line, as you can see, it's very expensive for our area to be in non-attainment. And so what is our strategy here at MAG? Well, first and foremost is we want to decrease the ozone to get us back into compliance. That's the best thing for public health and the environment, certainly the best thing for the economy. That's something that we're continuing to work in with the counties right now to find out what those measures are. The second is that we are looking at international transport. We do know we are impacted by emissions from Mexico and East Asia, and we're looking at what that impact is. Under the Clean Air Act, we can make a demonstration for that. The only challenge with that is it locks us into those non-attainment levels. Wherever we can prove that international emissions impacted us, we kind of get locked in, but it does stop us from going up that classification ladder. And then thirdly, and something that we have been working on recently, is working with our federal partners to have that conversation about background. So if we remember the little pie graph there earlier, the gray, that is something that we really do need to talk to the EPA about. Obviously, most of those emissions are outside of our control, and so we do need to have that conversation with our partners. We did recently send a letter to the EPA that they did respond to, so that conversation is going well. And so I think we're hitting all three of these targets as expected. So with that, I think we have the bottom lines that we had talked about. So we are on the fast track, unfortunately, to serious non-attainment. Ozone does impact both public health, the environment, and the economy. The Prop 400 extensions actually do give us positive air quality benefits and is a strategic part of our air quality plan. And then lastly, we want to keep our control local. If we don't submit a plan and get an approvable plan, the federal government has the legal obligation to step in, which is referred to as a federal implementation plan. We're regulated out of San Francisco. Probably best that we do our plan locally. Otherwise, we kind of turn over control to San Francisco. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? No. I just have one question, which is not about the non-attainment and everything, but does anyone know the reason why for allowing the Maricopa County to vote on this, for the voters on it? Why is Maricopa County the only county that has to go through the state legislation?
Thank you, Mayor. The reason why Maricopa County is the only county that has to go to the legislature in order to have a vote is because in the late 90s, a legislator named Jerry Overton was the chair of a transportation committee. And for some reason, and Mr. Overton has unfortunately passed away, so no one can ask him, he slipped into some legislation that rule. So for those of you who live in Pinal County, you know that Pinal has had votes about the Regional Transportation Authority that did not have to go to the legislature because the legislation allows all counties except Maricopa to have that authority. And so it was a rule in the late 90s, and no one can quite explain anymore why Mr. Overton did that, but he did. And so we were faced with having to go back to the legislature again here in 2024 for the tax that expires at the end of 2025. I'm sorry, 2023. It expires in 2025.
Yeah. Okay, well, I don't think that's fair, but
Goes against taxation with representation, right?
yes.
A little bit of folks in Douglas and Page and Safford voting on the ability of Maricopa County residents to have their ability to choose to vote. It doesn't make sense to me either.
Your Honor, I do have a question. This presentation, was this educational? I mean, I'm trying to,
Yeah.
I'm trying to kind of really get through, throw money at it, ozone goes away?
Great question.
I mean, we're a landlocked state. You don't think our air quality comes from like Mexico, New Mexico? I mean,
Right.
to look at this thing, I see a nice contained little area and we say, hey, if we, everybody's gonna get sick if we don't take care of this. But guess what? We need a lot of money to take care of this. So I'm just curious, what was the purpose behind this?
The question is, so what, right? So what? Vice Mayor, I think you asked that. That's what you're asking. So you have this
That's not what I
presentation,
said.
so what, right?
No, it's more like, you had this presentation, so why?
So why? I think the important thing here is there's going to be more and more discussion about restrictions on growth in Maricopa County, and that has a reason. It's not because somebody just wants to. It's because these laws have established this framework that Maricopa County, even into Pinal County, that a large part of the MAG region falls into. And so it's going to become, as soon as late 2024, much more difficult to get businesses relocating here or expanding here unless we do some things. And some of those things may be, I don't know exactly where Apache Junction is, but some of the cities are talking about trying to replace their fleets with electric vehicles. So I know in Phoenix or Mesa, people are starting to talk about garbage trucks going electric. That's really difficult in a hot desert environment, but at least going to natural gas is better than diesel. So all the things that are, as you said, are expensive that we have to put money towards in terms of electric vehicles or more clean burning diesel vehicles. It even starts getting into non-vehicle emissions, so big diesel generators, big batch plants, as Tim said, that have emissions. There's going to be more and more rules put on them because of this situation. And so, we may hear about, well, such and such decided not to locate here. They went to Texas or they went to south of Casa Grande. The reason will be if we can't get our hands around the ozone issue. So it's really sort of what's the context for the dialogue that we're going to hear in the next couple of years about more difficulty to get economic development projects or more requests to do things like, can we convert some of our city vehicles to electric instead of gas? That gives us benefits. And so that's the context.
So, just out of curiosity, so is this 70 particles per million? Is that a reasonable expectation?
That's a great question too, and the problem with reasonable is there's probably as many definitions of reasonable as there are people in the room.
Well, like for example, you had the graph up. 2021, you were at 75 to 80.
Right.
Now 2020, skies were clear.
Right.
People were working from home. Freeways were empty. I mean, and if that didn't get us down to the 70s, I don't know what will.
Right, and that Vice Mayor kind of gets to the third part of that pyramid, which is we've got a job to do as a region in communicating with the people back east about the realities of us here. That we're not like the East Coast, and we're in the same boat as Albuquerque, that's Phoenix, Albuquerque, Las Vegas, Denver, Fort Collins, Colorado Springs. We're all in the same boat as we are in a similar environment with lots of sunlight that makes it easy to create ozone. And we've got, what we're trying to demonstrate is we've got ozone creating stuff floating in from California, from Mexico, even from East Asia, that we can't control, and we need some help in accounting for that in the federal rules. So far, it's been difficult to get the federal government to pay attention to that, but in having these conversations and getting the chambers of commerce energized in our links with our other MAG-type agencies in those cities I mentioned, we're starting to make some headway through our senators with the folks in Washington, that one size may not fit all on ozone, and we need some help dealing with our particular circumstance before they just drop penalties on us.
Okay.
So, your questions are right to the heart of it, so thank you.
I'm just curious. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember growing up in the 80s, ozone was,
Right.
all the rage.
Right.
And I guess came back around here.
Well, and that's the
30 years
confusing
later.
thing is ozone in the atmosphere, like out there, protects us from being burned up by the sun. That was the ozone conversation of the 80s when I was growing up too. It was like, changing what comes out of the aerosol cans and all that stuff, because it was eating away the layer out there that protects us from the sun. But ozone here, we're talking about, is created right here at ground level. That stuff gets in our lungs and creates that public health problem. So it's the same ozone, but it does two different things. So that's why it feels like deja vu, except that it's a different ozone problem now than it was back when you and I were growing up.
It's just a new crisis,
Yeah,
right, to throw money
exactly.
at. We need more money to
Right.
solve this problem that's unsolvable.
Right.
Do you believe that the national government is going to take into consideration the ozone coming across from California and Asia and those places that lands here?
We are going to fight for that, and we're having that conversation. We're really encouraged because both Senators Kelly and Sinema have listened a lot to Tim, and we've gotten the attention of our two senators, who I think can have some impact, and that was also the reason why the chair of MAG and I sent a letter earlier to the EPA saying, you got to help us here with this issue of the stuff we can't control, we need some help with. Now, I've used this example before. We got to do two things here, right? It's sort of like, I use example like when my kids would come home from school and say, I don't like math class and I don't like the math teacher, and I'm getting an F. Okay, well, an F isn't acceptable, so what are you doing? If my kid said, I'm doing nothing because I don't like the teacher, well, how can I help you? But if they say, I'm going in after school for tutoring, and can you help me sit down for an extra 15 minutes? If they're doing something, then I can work with them, right? It's the same with the EPA. If we go to the EPA and say, we can't meet the standard, we're not doing anything, they're going to say, well, what are we supposed to do? But if we say, look, we are trying here, we are working hard at this, but your rules and nature makes it almost impossible for us to do anything, then we can have a dialogue about it. So we need to do two things. We need to work at it to reasonably, and we need help. And that's where we're getting our senators are really helping us out at this point.
Okay.
Thank you all for
Thank you all.
Your
Thanks
time.
for coming
Appreciate it.
out.
Thank you.
Appreciate the information.
Yep. Thank you, Tim and Ed. And we'll turn the time now. We're really excited, Mayor, to have with us 4 new sergeants to be introduced to the community, and we'll turn the time over to Chief Michael Pooley.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Happy to be here, be back in the U.S. too, so it's great to see all of you. We're excited tonight to present 4 of our newest sergeants. 3 of them are here tonight, and I'm going to have them come up. I'll start with Stephanie Jewell. She's been with Apache Junction Police Department for 8 years. She's been a police officer for over 11 years. She was promoted late last year, and we're happy to have her. Next is Anthony Damon, who was just recently promoted here in the last couple of weeks, about the last month. He's been with AJPD for about 15 years, and he just came from a state auto theft task force where he spent several years. And last is Josh DuPont, who was promoted just a couple weeks ago, and he's been with Apache Junction Police Department for 12 years. And why this is such a big deal, Mayor, members of council, is because it's the sergeant is the driving force of our police department. They set the tone. They encourage, they mentor, they teach, they hold accountable all of our frontline officers. And every one of these sergeants are somebody to be commended. We're extremely grateful for them, for the commitment they've made to the city of Apache Junction and to the police department. This is the hardest promotion you'll take as a police officer, harder than even testing for a chief of police. It is definitely something to be commended for, and I'm glad we're able to recognize them here tonight. So I'll present them to the And Jesse Frantz, who is not here, he's on military leave right now. He has been with the department for 11 years. And again, he brings with him a lot of different specialty assignments with SWAT and so a lot of undercover and other operational things that we need out on the street. So he's not here, but he's here in spirit, and we're grateful to him as well.
Great. Let's get a picture, Al.
Yeah.
Hey, Mayor?
Come in the good light.
Mayor? I just want to say congratulations, Chief, and we're glad you're back from Mount Kilimanjaro, but thank you for stepping up to the plate. It is a big, big challenge when you go from being an officer to a sergeant. You take on a lot of responsibility, and thank you for that.
Come on there.
Yeah.
And we'll turn the time to Al Bravo to a couple of current events, and that'll be it.
Speaking of the chief and his trip, I just want to make a mention of that. Good evening to you, Mayor and members of the City Council. Al Bravo, Public Information Officer. A couple of quick announcements. I did want to acknowledge that the chief did successfully scale Mount Kilimanjaro and has safely returned to the United States. And he was featured on Channel 3's Good Morning Arizona program on Monday morning yesterday in a live interview along with his buddy from the Tempe Police Department, correct? It was, really inspiring just to hear a little bit of the story of their trip to Africa and scaling the mountain and doing all of the that they did for Angels on Patrol, correct? So you will hear and see a lot more about that. We're going to try to feature a little bit more of it on our website as well as through the media. So I did want to acknowledge that as well. Today is the first day you can apply to be appointed to one of our boards and commissions. Every year we open up the application process through, of course, the City Clerk's office, and you can go to our website, apachejunctionaz.gov/boards, and you can find the application forms there. It's a great way to be involved in your community. I can tell you that I'm looking at 4 of you have all sat on a board or commission with the city before serving as a city council member. It is one way to do that, but it's, of course, another great way to give back to your community. So you can now apply for those. The deadline is September the 15th, and then we will see interviews and appointments in October. A reminder that you can find all of the stuff on the city's website and also, of course, in the newsletter, as I always say. We'd like to thank, by the way, all the people who are involved, including Parks and Development Services and everybody that made our dog park dedication this morning possible, braving the heat and the humidity in what has turned out to be a really, really successful little program to bring public art to our future projects in the city of Apache Junction. Those are your announcements for August 1st, 2023.
Thank you. Excuse me. Okay, public hearings on ordinance number 1536, approving the rezoning and description in case number 22-130 PZ. And can we also put that together with the next one, the 10?
Yep.
Resolution number 23-18 concerning the same property?
We're
Nick.
good with that, Joel, right? Do one public hearing.
Thank you for the introduction, Your Honor. Although I prepared this presentation previously at the work session, since this is a simple zoning case, we wanted to actually give the opportunity to present to our planning intern, Clayton Holtz. Clayton has been with us since March, and as part of our internship program, we regularly try to give our interns the opportunity to present. He is finishing up his internship term soon, and we wanted to give him this opportunity as we believe it'd be a great one.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. I'm Clayton Holtz. I'm a student at Arizona State University studying urban planning, and I have been the planning intern for Apache Junction since March of this year. I want to thank you, Council, and the planning team for giving me this opportunity to present tonight. I'm presenting the Plan Development Rezoning Case, P22-130 PZ. The site of this request is the southwest corner of West Superstition Boulevard and North Plaza Drive, a parcel of 0.92 acres. The applicant, John Fox of William Seymour Co. Incorporated, has requested to rezone this property from the current RS20 medium-density single-family residential to RM2/PD zoning designation high-density multifamily residential by plan development in order to develop a 16-unit two-story duplex community. The property is unique in its context as it is zoned for a single home, yet surrounded by an RV park to the south and west, and commercial uses such as Horizon Health to the east, and RV storage and the Arroyo Hermosa Business Center to the north. The current zoning context of this area makes this parcel an outlier in the area. The property is located within the downtown mixed-use area designated by our general plan in order to promote the growth of our downtown core. The general plan provides goals for the downtown core to encourage higher density multifamily residential development, a variety of housing types, and the promotion of mixed uses, while discouraging new single-family residential development. The general plan designation specifically encourages residential densities between 10 and 40 units per acre, with which the proposed development's density of 17.4 units per acre is consistent. Additionally, the density is comparable to the neighboring Lost Dutchman RV Resort, which has a density of 17.9 units per acre. These are the proposed elevations the applicant has provided. As previously mentioned, the community will consist of two-story duplexes. The 16 units of this duplex community will be leased by the unit. Each building has 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a private backyard, and a 1-car garage. Each unit will also have an assigned space outside, with the remaining parking surplus being guest parking. Provided here is this project's proposed site plan. Shown are the public amenities provided in the community, on the west being the shaded picnic area, and on the east, in the retention basin, another picnic area with a barbecue. There are only 2 minor deviations to the typical zoning standards that have been requested through the plan development, the first of which being a reduction of the minimum front and rear setback requirements from 20 feet to 10 feet. The second minor deviation is an allowance to put the required 10 feet of landscape strip within the right-of-way instead of within the property lines. This is consistent with the current landscaping of the surrounding area. These minor deviations allow for more design flexibility. The applicant has completed all necessary public notification requirements, including holding a neighborhood meeting. Staff has not received any comments from the public at this time. In review of the development proposal and the relevant general plan goals and policies, staff recommends the approval of P22-130PZ, subject to the conditions of approval noted in the staff report. This item was also heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission on June 27th, where they voted to recommend approval with a unanimous vote of 6-0. If you have any questions, I am happy to answer, and the applicant is also here today to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, Router?
Yes.
Clay, a couple questions. So there are 18 parking spaces that are not part of the, attached to the, or part of the garage parking, right? There's 18 spaces, that's along the, on your diagram here, along the bottom. And then there's a couple parking spaces just above the street on the south side, correct?
Yes, I believe there's a total of 20 parking, 20 parking spaces outside of the garages.
So there'll be no parking on the street itself?
That is correct.
Okay. Is the street, is it a private street? Will it be maintained by the HMO or developer, whatever?
The street itself is public. The landscaping that is in the right-of-way will be maintained by the property owner.
The interior, no, where is that?
Oh, the interiors.
The interior drive is private.
Sorry.
Okay, because
If that's what
it's not wide enough to be public, okay.
That is correct.
A fire department weighed in, they're okay with getting their apparatus around and all that?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clay. By the way, where are the donuts, remember?
Oh, shoot.
I said you got to bring donuts. I'm kidding.
Anyone else?
Your Honor.
Yes.
So one of my concerns about this is the parking as well. So each one has a garage, but each one has its own individual parking space. And then I see there are 4 just spare parking spaces, right? So virtually every household has the capacity to have 2 vehicles.
Correct.
So what concerns me about this is that, so across the street to the east, you have Earth Heart Park Garden. Now, that has been the host of many events. In fact, last Halloween, I think they saw up to 400 people there. And people were parked in these parking spaces, whether the trunk or treat or however it goes. And what I fear is that these parking spaces are now going to start being used as overflow parking for the residents of the complexes. And that is going to hurt the community's, I guess you could say, you know, it's the events that they put on there a few times a year. And that is where my concern really falls into play here. I mean, I know two spots per, let's just say I moved my family into one of them. There's 4 cars right there. That is the one concern. I don't know if and one of the other concerns is that during the initial plan that was submitted, they actually had an arrow to those parking spaces saying additional parking. So it was kind of already thought of to say, hey, anything that we can't accommodate inside, these guys can park outside. So I don't know if the builder can address that, and I don't know, maybe feel better about this whole situation.
Yeah, I'm John Fox. I'm the purchaser of the property and developer. And we've studied, thank you very much. We've studied this project for close to a year. We have, in our visits to the site, we haven't seen a lot of parking, but I haven't been to the events either. Now, are the events handled by the parcel to the east of us?
Well, the garden area is community, right? And everybody's welcome to go through there, pick some vegetables, volunteer, do whatever they like. But
Right.
during the course of the year, we have like farmers markets there. We have, and then Of course, the director, I guess you could call him, of the garden is putting on things for Christmas, putting on things for Halloween, putting on things, just different times of the year, just to bring the community together.
Sure.
And those have been starting to gain traction. 3-4 years ago, not so much the Halloween thing or the Christmas thing, but over the last 2 years, they've been starting to grow and gain traction. I would just hate to see that if these events to be stopped because an apartment complex got put up.
Yeah, this is more of it's gonna be owned by one owner. It's not gonna be sold off as units. So I would think that renters would not normally have more than two cars. I can't be assured of that altogether. The other thing we've done is we've added parking in the right-of-way to where we have right now an entrance structure there. So we've added some off-site parking. I think it'll accommodate 2 additional parking spaces. As far as overflow parking, I mentioned the fact that we have adequate or more than adequate parking on site for normal living conditions and so forth. If there was any additional parking needed, they could possibly use the parking that is contiguous to the site. But that's not a condition of approval. We have actually 4 additional parking spaces on site, as well as we've accommodated for 2 additional off-site. So I feel that we have kind of met our needs with regards to more of an apartment-type community versus a single-family home development and that sort of thing. There might be a way of noticing the neighborhood of an event that they cannot park off-site. I don't know how you can police that, but we don't anticipate a lot of overflow parking in this small community. It's a rental community, and we feel that 2 cars, would probably be the maximum that any household would probably own in this community.
I have 2 questions for Joel. Is there any way legally that, one, that we can limit on that street on Phelps? No, that's not Phelps, that's Plaza. That we can limit put up signs that there's no overnight parking, and vehicles parking overnight would be towed or something to that effect. And number 2, since this is owned by one person and everybody living there is going to be renters, can we legally tell the owner to put into their contract, their rental agreements, that there will be no, that the people who live there must park on their property?
Or a maximum of 2.
Something to that effect?
Or a maximum of 2 cars.
Or a maximum of 2 vehicles per unit or something like that. I mean, what are we allowed to legally tell them to do or not do?
The first issue is whether you can condition parking. And the answer is yes. You could put up restricted parking signs. You can do that. That would apply to anybody. You certainly can do that. Put certain hours there for parking only. You have to patrol it, of course, so then it becomes a police law enforcement issue. The second issue is whether you can add a condition that says no tenants can park on the public property. That's what you're asking, correct?
Well, I think maybe better, like Darrell said, limiting each unit that they can't rent out to have more than 2 Arizona registered vehicles to any given unit?
No, I don't think you can do
Okay.
that.
I didn't think so.
That's a bit of a stretch. As per dictating to the types of covenants, let's see. You could try to do that. I'm not sure the applicant would want to do that, but whether that's, I'd have to research that, whether that is enforceable. I'm not sure it would be. There could be a breach of the alienation clause of the Constitution to do that. I'm not sure you can do that. But you might want to ask the applicant if they're willing to do that.
Yeah, we haven't worked up a rental agreement on this site at this point. I think we could restrict just like a homeowners association can restrict people from parking in their driveways overnight in some cases in my homeowners association. We can restrict the renter to no more than 2 vehicles on site. That way, if they have a third vehicle, they have to find other accommodations for that. So that would be the answer. I think we could, I think that's how we could handle it.
That,
Okay.
Okay.
I wouldn't bother with that, because that's exactly what we're trying to avoid in the first place. I guess if there's just some way we can just, the parking spaces that engulf Earth Heart Park in that area, just if we can find a way to say, hey, just you can't park there overnight, that'll discourage people from parking. I know people are gonna have visitors and they're gonna need to park somewhere, so I get it, but I just don't want it to become a parking lot for people who live there. You're saying this is more of an apartment style, correct?
It is.
It's not so much, your family's place. Well, what comes with apartments comes roommates, and roommates have cars. And so if you offer 1 3-bedroom in there, there's 3 cars right there. So,
Yeah.
I'm just concerned about the
Sure,
parking
I can understand
on the
that.
street.
I think that you can limit the subletting of the apartments. You have to, if somebody is renting out rooms, that can be a restriction in this facility for sure. We don't want it to become an Airbnb or anything like that. So it'll be one owner, and they'll have control over what family structure lives there, I would think. I don't know the exact rules as far as and how you can restrict any individual.
Which I wouldn't think you'd even want to. That's
No,
getting ridiculous.
that's-
It really is.
But I appreciate, I understand your concern, so.
But if we can work that out on the city's end.
Right.
Mayor?
That's the
I'm okay
city
with
issue.
that.
We're talking anyway about lots of different public street parking
Sure.
in the downtown, and so we need to be probably looking towards a more regulatory environment there.
Talking about parking on the city street, I believe we need to put hours on that. Like 10 till 6 or 10 till 5 in the morning, whatever the hours we want to have no one parked there. That way now we're legally, the police can go by, it's 10 o'clock, there's a car there, they go by at 11, it's still there. Now they can take action.
And even how long they're there.
Yep,
Remember, we talked about that about a month ago.
yep.
Do you have any kind of issues with that particular area at this time, or?
Yeah, that's not part of the rezoning tonight. We could talk about
Yeah.
that whenever, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
This is a public hearing. Anyone like to speak on these 2?
Oh, is he all done?
Donica, AJ resident. Just to say, if you're going to have a 2-bedroom, you might want to tell them not to have any kids. Because I had 2 teenagers driving when they turned 16, and they both had a truck. So you got to take into consideration that the teenagers and also the setbacks being switched from 20 feet to 10 feet. Well, that's sort of like back when Dairy Queen said they wanted flashing lights. And then Joe Blow down the street says, well, you gave him permission for flashing lights, so can I. So just saying, if everybody else has to follow the same standards, thanks.
I just want to give a little bit of input on
Oh, your
what
name and
it's
address,
like
please.
Name and address?
What?
Name and address?
I'm sorry.
Name and address?
Oh, Charlene Lockwood, and I live in the Apache Junction Villas, which is 235 West Teepee.
Okay.
And I'm on the corner of Teepee and Plaza. I live in a duplex-type community. It's all duplexes. And I don't know how wide the streets are. Our street will have 2 lanes, no sidewalks, and we can park in our garage, and if we pull way over in front of the front door, you can park a car there and you can park a car behind the one in the garage. There is no parking anywhere for guests. If I want to have my son and daughter-in-law, and then my kids, a couple of them come down from Utah, there is no place for them to park. They have to park around the block, come all the way around again. So if you're going to do this, take into consideration your concern, parking. Make sure it is there for them. Make sure the streets are wide enough that you can have a sidewalk and maybe on one side or the other, parking at night. But don't put it that way, the way I am. It's okay for us old folks. But at the same time, I would not ever want this for my children or my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren. It is a scary thing. Even with us going 25 miles an hour, and if 2 of us are backing our cars out at the same time, we can hit each other almost as we get into the road. It is very, very scary. You have to be very much aware of where you are. If there were little kids in there, no, I wouldn't want my kids to do it. So there's my opinion as an old lady.
Thank you.
I've been in her neighborhood. It's really tight.
Good evening. I'm Jane Brown, Val Vista Road. First, I want to say Arizona is really getting in the news since the last meeting. We had the mayor of Phoenix on Face the Nation. We had NPR doing a story about wildcat subdivisions avoiding the 100-year water rule, and also a story about build to rent, avoiding a lot of state rules. Casa Grande just got in major trouble for approving build-to-rent units. So we may want to take a really close look at what we're doing, Superstition and Royal Palm, and this one, because the state is going after Casa Grande. Also, Fox 10 Point News had a story about the heat on the school buses. It was on television.
Excuse me, ma'am. This is for
Okay.
this particular item.
Okay. This unit, can you put up the picture that shows the layout of the internal?
It's right there.
Right there in front of you?
The internal that shows the 600 square feet? Okay, these are 2 stacked stories. You have 600 square feet in the bottom, a kitchen, living room, laundry room, and a water closet, a toilet, and a sink. Upstairs, you have 3 rooms. 2 were called bedrooms. One is 8 by 12, one is 9 by 12, one is 12 by 12. One of them has a double sink attached ensuite bathroom. Then there's a hall bath with 2 other rooms. I really believe the intention is 3 bedrooms upstairs. So when they say 2 bedrooms, it's not 2 bathrooms, it's not 2 bathrooms. It's a half bath downstairs. It has 1 bath with a bathtub, which makes it a full bath. Then there's a bath with a shower, which is a 3/4 bath. So it's actually 2, it's not 2 bathrooms, okay? And those rooms, when they call it a bonus room and it's the mid-sized room, I really think they're thinking 3 bedrooms. So I really think we're talking about 48 cars. 1 person, 1 bedroom. And you cannot stop people from getting roommates. You can say it's illegal, but people do it all the time. And the park that's across there, their pictures looked old, because now it's really built up. There's benches, there's gazebos, there's all kinds of things going on. We had 1,000 people at the Ladybug event. That's a lot of people that came to our area, and they didn't live in AJ. They're actually coming to AJ, which is kind of remarkable. So we can build up that location as something people come to AJ to attend. Now, AJ, we have a center
and Plaza Drive goes down to the old Bayless Shopping Center. When that New York owner finally lets go, that's going to be a beautiful downtown area, and Plaza feeds right to it. And we have Hackers, which is a, historical restaurant. You have Saguaro Fitness, which used to be the post office. That whole area can really become a corridor. I really don't think that 48 bedrooms is appropriate for that corner that's less than an acre, going from a single residence to 48 people. I don't think it's appropriate for AJ. Going to something commercial, I would think would be a great idea. Thank you. Like a restaurant, an outdoor restaurant with misters? That would really do something across from the park. That would be a great use of that land. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? All right.
Oh, got one more.
Oh,
Catherine Meek, 1327 South Bel Air Road in Apache Junction. I just have a couple questions. I was trying to find on my phone what the average car ownership was for apartment dwellers here in Apache Junction. I think that might kind of enlighten as to how many cars we're really looking at. In my previous neighborhood, they put in low-income housing apartment structures, and they said, well, they don't need cars, so we aren't going to allow more than 1.1 cars per apartment. And the neighborhood said, no, it's going to be outrageous. They're going to be parking all along our streets. And they did. So I'm just curious what the rate of car ownership is for people who will be living there. Because if it's a husband and wife and one teenager, that's 3 cars. But if it's going to be 2 older people, then maybe it's 1, maybe it's 2. We don't know. Just my thoughts.
thank you. Anyone else? Yep.
John Fox here again. This project's been heard before the Planning Commission. It's been noticed, and we haven't had any comments at all up until tonight. And I also viewed the work session on this. We're not going to have 48 people living in that facility. We think it's a great infill piece. I think it's the architecture is going to be nice and pleasant. It's a good use of the property, and we just feel that if these issues were that large, I mean, we have more parking than the ordinance requires, and that if these should have been brought up at the Planning Commission level, so we could have addressed them here at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Don't see any other movement. Okay. Any other comments from the council? Discussions?
Your Honor,
Yes.
I tend to agree with the rest of the council in being concerned about the parking. I also kind of feel that the developer should have been made aware that this was more of an issue than not. But I think he has addressed it, and I think we can address the parking along the street with signage that keeps overnight parking from occurring. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Thank you.
Okay. So can I have a motion for the first consideration for ordinance number 1536?
Your Honor,
Yes.
I move that ordinance number 1536 be read by title only and the reading of the entire ordinance be waived.
Roll call?
Did you get a second?
Is there a
Oh,
second?
yeah, I need a second.
Second.
Okay, now I need a roll call.
Councilmember Nesser,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Cross,
Yes.
Councilmember Heck,
Yes.
Councilmember Soller,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schroeder,
Yes.
Mayor Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you. Ordinance number 1536, an ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of Apache Junction, Arizona, approving a rezoning by plan development as described in case P22-130PZ as requested by John Fox of William Seymour Company, Inc., adopted by reference that certain document entitled Legal Descriptions and Zoning Conditions of Case P-22-130-PZ, authorized under Ordinance Number 1536, repealing any conflicting provisions and providing for severability.
Okay, now do I have the main motion?
Your Honor, I move that ordinance number 1536, as read by the city clerk, be approved and adopted.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call?
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Heck,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schroeder,
No.
Councilmember Soller,
Yes.
Councilmember Cross,
Yes.
Councilmember Nesser,
Yes.
Mayor Wilson.
Yes.
Motion passes, Your Honor, 6-1.
Okay, now can I get a motion for consideration of resolution number 23-18?
Your Honor,
Yes.
I move that resolution number 23-18, a resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Apache Junction, Arizona, declaring as a public record that certain document filed with the city clerk entitled Legal Descriptions and Zoning Conditions of Case Number P-22-130-PZ, authorized under Ordinance Number 1536 for a planned development rezoning of approximately .92 net acres, repealing any conflicting provisions and providing for severability, be approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call?
Councilmember Soller,
Yes.
Councilmember Nesser,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Cross,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schroeder,
No.
Councilmember Heck,
Yes.
Mayor Wilson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1, Your Honor.
Okay. Presentation, discussion, and public hearing number, case P23-16 AM. Nick, again.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Your Honor. I think tonight's discussion is ever more relevant. Tonight I'm presenting the proposed text amendment to Article 1-7 of the Zoning Ordinance, the parking, loading, and circulation regulations. As has been noted, the adequate parking within our city has always been a pretty prevalent concern for both the City Council, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and for our residents. There's always questions when we have a new development come in, and is there going to be overflow parking? Is there going to be adequate parking? Is this going to impact the neighborhood? And as a result of that, we've had a lot of time to try and work this out. On December 13th of last year, the Planning and Zoning Commission formally issued a direction to staff to research and provide recommendations regarding the city's parking regulations. Since that time, we have had ongoing and reoccurring discussions and work sessions with the Planning and Zoning Commission in order to really formulate proper recommendations. We've looked at the best practices of other cities, we've looked at the demand within our community, we've looked at the parking trends, and comparable code language in order to determine what the best recommendations we could make for the city are when it comes to parking. Through this entire process, we formed a final draft which was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission on June 27th, 2023, just about a little over a month ago. And at that time, they voted unanimously to recommend approval of these texts, the proposed text amendment. Chief among these, the first requirement that the first recommendation that we propose is the addition of a guest parking requirement. Currently, the zoning ordinance does not have any guest parking requirement. So when we look at the parking requirements of any kind of new development, it is solely limited to a bedroom count for the residents. And that, of course, turns into these situations where we ask that question, is there enough parking for guests? Is there enough parking for any possible overflow? And as has been noted, when a developer meets the minimum requirement, it may not take those things into mind. And that has been identified as a primary concern when it comes to a lot of these projects. As such, assessing the demand and the best practices of code language, staff recommends a requirement of 0.3 guest parking spaces per dwelling unit in a multifamily residential community. What this would look like is if there were 100 units, beyond the minimum resident parking requirement, which is generally, if you have 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, 2 per unit. In addition to that, 30 guest parking spaces or overflow parking spaces would be required in addition to make sure that enough parking for any kind of need is accommodated on site. As another recommendation, as part of this text amendment, staff also recommends clarifying language regarding the Americans with Disabilities Act parking requirements. As this is a federal law regulating accessible parking requirements, we are not proposing any changes or any amendments to the language itself. However, the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act are not strictly identified within the zoning ordinance, and we recommend including the actual code language saying this is what the parking required would be within our own zoning ordinance so that all that language is contained in one place. It's clear. Anyone who researches our parking standards can see what we require within the zoning ordinance itself. And so we just recommend including this information. Also currently, the zoning ordinance does not have any language regarding motorcycle parking, but recognizing that there's a large presence within the community, staff recommends a new code that provides for motorcycle parking spaces, which are noted as half the size of a regular parking space. These spaces have been found to promote safety for motorcyclists and reduce the frequency of parking issues, and allow also for some design flexibility for a developer because of the reduced size. It's been noted that this reduces instances in which someone does not see a motorcycle when they're turning into a parking spot, or having motorcyclists park on sidewalk and different issues like that. And so as part of this, staff has recommended that 2 motorcycle parking stalls shall be provided out of every 75 motor vehicle parking spaces required out of a parking lot. Another notable presence in our community that the zoning ordinance does not address is that of bicycle parking and bicyclists. Staff recommends implementing bicycle parking provisions. As different land uses have different demands, we have broken down the different land categories and different requirements for each of them, and believe that this is the right way to meet the different needs of bicycle parking within the community. As a new and developing technology, something that we have often talked about as well when it comes to parking and the adequate provision of parking is that regarding electrical vehicles. In assessing the demand as a new technology and the appropriate level of usage, staff recommends that 1 motor vehicle parking space out of every 250 motor vehicle parking spaces shall be required to be equipped with at least a level 2 electrical vehicle charging station. As a quick clarification of what that is, level 2 is the industry standard regarding voltage. It is equivalent to like a dryer or an oven, and it is a standard that we normally see when it comes to electrical vehicle parking. This table denotes that this requirement would specifically kick in for parking lots above 250 parking spaces. When we're looking at things like a Walmart that has over 1,000, let's say 1,000 parking spaces, at that point they would be required to provide 4 electrical vehicle charging stations. But then if we're looking at a smaller parking lot, things that we see most common, whether it's like an office or a fast food restaurant, most of the time they only have something like 40 parking spaces or less. And at that point, we would not seek to impose this requirement on them. We've assessed the different needs of demand and the types of uses at which this kind of requirement would even make sense for. And we believe that these numbers and these ratios are most appropriate for this. In summary, staff is recommending 5 changes to the parking regulations, including guest parking, accessible parking, motorcycle, bicycle, and electric vehicle parking, as we just reviewed, in order to simplify and improve our code and to address the needs of our community. I must note that this applies strictly to new development. We do not retroactively go back and change the existing parking lots in the city, but for any new developers, anytime we have this kind of question with a new multifamily community, they would be required to make sure that they provide things like this extra guest parking, to make sure that any kind of development does not end up impacting the surrounding neighborhood. With this, staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend the approval of P 2316 AM, the draft text amendment to the Apache Junction City Code for the parking, loading, and circulation regulations as presented. I will note that as case P 2315 AM, which is also a parking text amendment regarding trailers and with living quarters and the different requirements regarding that, as this is all concerning Article 1-7, staff requests that this case, P 2316 AM, be continued in coordination with P 2315 AM. Since they are amending the same section, they will be acted upon in the same ordinance. And with that, in terms of dates, we request that this case, as well as the upcoming case, P 2315 AM, be continued to the September 5th City Council meeting, rather than provide an ordinance to vote on at this time. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I have one.
Yes.
Did you just say we're wrapping this one in with the integrated horse trailer one?
So we
And
specifically
under the
want
same motion?
we want both items to be
No.
yeah.
No.
Let's answer the question.
Yeah.
We're not wrapping it in. Rudy, maybe you come up here and explain, but or Sydney, these are gonna be brought forward. They're not being wrapped in to anything else. They're just part of the same code. We just wanted to continue this as part of the next one, which is in the same code, right?
There are two different text amendments, but the text amendments are proposed to Article 1-7, which is the parking regulations. So we could have done it piecemeal, which would have cost more in publishing costs and all that kind of stuff. We are recommending that both items be decided on the same night, not necessarily exactly as presented, either in this case or in the other case, but that if we're going to amend the parking regulations, that both amendments be done on the same night.
Okay. And I have one question about this. Being that we're changing to bicycle parking and electric vehicle chargers requiring to, is that, can we say that's our contribution to the ozone layer thing here?
Make sure Mag comes. We'll certainly let Mag be
Thank
aware, yep.
So, Mr.
Yeah.
Mayor, if I can, I want to ask this question. So in the end, there's going to be one ordinance and one resolution because it's kind of long and you want to adopt it by reference. Is that correct? Both of these items?
That is currently how we've prepared it. They were broken into two cases so that the actual content of the amendments could be considered separately, but the final action, just to replace the actual current code, was proposed as one ordinance.
So I just want to make that clear to council that there'll be an ordinance and a resolution. They'll adopt it by reference. They will be together. However, it's up to you if you want to decide that on September 5th or have more additional studies. And I think you might want to do that because you haven't seen the amendments that you wanted, I think, from last time. So,
Mayor,
Yes.
on here, it says bring it back August 22nd, 2023. You actually want to bring it back in September, correct?
That is what we have agreed on. We prepared the August 22nd date at an earlier point.
So what's the
and then
date you want?
So we have determined September 5th. So about 30 days, 1 month from this meeting, the earliest September meeting. Just so that, because were we to make changes to the other case tonight, all of the documentation for that would have to be in tomorrow in order to make the August 22nd meeting. So this gives just a little bit more time.
Well, tonight wouldn't be a consideration for the next P 2315 AM, right? It's just a presentation, discussion, and public hearing.
Correct. We just need to continue it to a date certain. That's all we're looking towards.
Okay.
Your Honor, Nick, I have a question.
Yes.
I understand we're updating parking ordinance, and I understand that we're moving towards electric vehicles, whether we like it or not, because all car manufacturers are going to stop producing combustion engines within about the next 20 years. So I can see this stuff happening. But I'm just curious,
what brought about us all of a sudden out of the clear blue sky to say, now we gotta have developers build bike racks and specific motorcycle parking? This has never been an issue, or has it? Or have I just missed it all these years? Motorcycle parking and bicycle racks, and are we pushing the limits a little quick, requiring developers to put in electric charging stations? Because do we even know yet how that's going to develop over the next 10, 20 years? These things, will they still be what's being used 10 years from now? So what brought all this about?
Excellent question. Thank you, Councilmember Nestor. This is something that we've been studying even longer from before the direction of staff was issued in December of last year. Breaking apart the different items. When it comes to electric vehicle parking, that is something that had been noted and pressed as an upcoming need. We believe that this recommendation is just a minimum baseline in terms of if we don't address, we believe that the ratio is small enough to not be burdensome in any way, any significant way, I should say, especially because there's things and accommodations made through programs such as what SRP has and rebates and things like that. But in terms of just providing a minimum threshold of an accommodation so that in the future we're not left with nothing, that is why we have made this minimum recommendation. When it comes to bicycles and motorcycles, as we made these parking studies, we found that in researching the best practices of other cities and comparable parking codes, that these were things that are simply not identified within our zoning ordinance at all. Bicyclists have a larger presence and impact in our community, and just making sure that there's a minimum adequate provision for bicycles themselves. We believe that introducing this provision would alleviate that and have a minimum provision. When it comes to motorcycles, this is actually something that actually provides greater flexibility for the developer, because the smaller space allows them a different design flexibility, and that was something that was found in the best practices. In terms of the need, we've seen that more kind of on like a parking enforcement aspect, not something we see in terms of before looking at a project thinking that there's going to be X amount of motorcycles, but just because it's just such a part of our community right now as a parking enforcement question, we often see you end up with motorcycles parked in the wrong places or on the sidewalk specifically because they don't want it to get damaged in a normal motor vehicle parking space. And as best practices have developed and evolved and parking studies have been conducted around the nation, this was found as something beneficial to just generally everyone, both the developer and to the motorcycle parking itself. And given that we are revising this section of the parking regulations, we believe that it was appropriate to recommend this.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the bicycle industry one of the fastest, largest growing industries out there right now, especially your mountain biking and your e-bikes? At least in my perspective and all the trail riding I do by horseback, it's hard not to see a bicycle out on the trails now. They're very well organized, and I could see as we develop our downtown center that, having a few bike racks here and there for people that come in from wherever on an e-bike. I mean, if you haven't ridden one, try them out. They're a blast. But I can see that stepping forward and moving in a futuristic thought process, getting, we're not overdoing the electrical charging stations per se. You're only requiring a few. Financially, I couldn't see that being burdensome, especially if it's being put in as the site is being developed, from bare dirt to a building. Retrofitting is another story. That definitely could be expensive. Mm-hmm. But I think this is a good move in the right direction.
Thank you, Councilmember Cross. I will note that this is, the Apache Junction Public Works, as well as the Development Services Department, did form an active transportation plan just a couple years back, and that significantly proposed, improvements to our bicycle infrastructure as something that's really growing within Apache Junction, something becoming more prominent, especially as, different parts of the valley have started to fill in, and bicycling has become a pretty popular pastime, as well as a preferred mode of transportation in a small area like a downtown.
Mayor,
Yes.
I agree with Councilman Cross. I really think we need to be progressive, and I'm really glad you're coming forward with this new technology, the bicycle and the motorcycle parking. Those are all things that are needed, and as we grow as a city, it's really going to help us out. I agree with you. Motorcycles park on sidewalks and where they shouldn't park because of a lot of reasons. And as you know, if you're driving into the Fry's and you see that open parking space and you go to fly in there and there's a little scooter there, it's kind of like, oh man. So if we had a specific place for them to park, that'd be great. That would make it easy access for them, and it would open up the regular parking spaces for vehicles. So I like this. And if we're ready for a motion, Mayor, I'll make it.
Your Honor.
Yes.
So yeah, great concept, great idea. Now, one of the questions I have for you, so you're saying this is not retroactive. So where's the cutoff? So if, let's say this thing gets worked out, September, it's done, we agree to it. So are we talking from that point on? So if anybody that threw any, even if it was conceptual, hey, we're thinking about doing this, here's what we want to do in this area right here. Now, if they turn that into you, let's say today or yesterday, and this passed on, let's say in September 1st, are they now, even though it hasn't come to council, or even though nothing's really came about it, it was just almost like an interest? I guess what I'm asking is, at where's the cutoff that says that, okay, these guys don't have to do it because they were already showing interest before we did this, even though it never got to a point of reality yet?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Schroeder. What you're referring to is a common question within the planning realm, referring to something called vested rights, vested entitlement rights. Joel, you're leaning forward. If you have something to say, I'd be happy to turn it to you. But as a question regarding what we have found within state law, within Arizona, anything, until this is actually adopted into formal code, we have to acknowledge our current standards until that point. So were someone to come in today and to give us a development plan that didn't meet this standard, we would have to review it under today's standard until the time of adoption.
Okay.
Also, Mr. Mayor, remember an ordinance for zoning is usually 30 days because there's a referendum period. That's a dirty word, I know, but some people, if they didn't like it, they could try to refer the matter to the voters. And there's another thing that you could do. You could put a effective time period on this, so it's not effective in 30 days. It's effective in 3 or 4 months, or however you want to do. You can do that also. So that's another possible option.
Well, I was just wondering, because I mean, just a rough estimate, how many concepts do you have? I mean, 50, 100?
That's a great question. Right now, we have different projects at different stages of development. I would say we have 7 under construction that are currently, they've already been approved, had their development plans
I
approved.
get all that, right. I'm talking
Right.
about the ones that just are square one.
Pure concepts. I don't have an exact number for you at this time. I can get back to you if you would like.
Well, no, it's not highly important, but, if you say, well, we've got a handful, maybe 10 or 15, then we're gonna start seeing these things being built around the city, and they might not break ground until fall or even winter. And then we say, well, where's their charging station, right? Where's their bicycle racks? Because they got in under the deadline. So that's all I was just curious to see where you kind of prioritize that, and we'll start seeing these buildings all over.
Thank you. I will note, this has been a constant and consistent need and a topic of discussion for, I would say, over a year now. Adequate parking, the different needs of things like electric vehicle parking, but even most specifically guest parking. While the ordinance itself may not take effect until the date of adoption or 30 days or however it works from then, when it comes to planning staff and the things that we negotiate for with developers and what we try to win for the city in this process, we are definitely already advocating for this higher standard. We try and get it wherever we can. Even within the last project, we went through at least 6 different iterations of the site plan in order to provide more guest parking. So on a legal basis, while it might not take effect until after that date, currently our practice right now is to try and make sure that we already are transitioning to this higher standard.
That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, do I have a motion?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Mayor, I move to continue case P-23-16AM in coordination with P-23-1-AM, as both cases are amended to the same section of City Code, to come back to us on Tuesday, September 5th, 2003.
Second.
One motion?
No, you need to open up the public hearing on this.
Oh,
We didn't-
do you make me reread
My
that again?
apologies,
Oh.
I'm going to make you read it again.
Okay,
And I guess
yes, all right, I see it now.
and I have a question too, then, so 2315 about the trailers, are we
So-
not discussing that now then?
We will. I would like to have 2 separate motions. And again, as Joel said, the reason you're going to have 2 separate motions, but it'll come back, is because it deals with the same section of code. And rather than adopting one ordinance and then rewriting that ordinance later. So 2 separate motions, both are here this evening for public hearings, and we will continue these items and the public hearing to that later date and time set.
Okay, so we still have the requirements for a public hearing, okay.
Yes.
This is a public hearing. Would anyone like to speak on the first one, the P-23-16 AM?
Good evening, Mayor, Council.
Name and address?
I'm trying to remember what it was. Andre Meek, 1327 South Bel Air Road here in AJ. As far as bike racks, motorcycle parking, EV chargers, good ideas. AJ is sadly lacking for infrastructure for bicycles. There's so many streets here that you wouldn't dare ride a bike on, because the number one problem with traffic in AJ is speeders. And they don't look for bikes, and so a good way to die. So, it's a good start. Get people, you give them a bike rack where hey, we can ride over there, we can lock up our bikes, we can go check this out. I'm all for that. As far as EV and everything like that, my wife has a plug-in hybrid. We charge it at home. And that's a tricky part. You get to apartments and stuff like that. Let's say there's, you got a 200-unit apartment like that. How many EV cars are going to be there? Well, if you're one charger per 250, that's going to do one car, and a stage 2 is going to take 8 hours to charge a full hybrid. Or a full EV, at least 8 hours. So, what's it going to do? One guy gets home real quick, he gets on the charger, nobody else can use it. So, it's kind of like, well, what do we require? What are we going to require there? Maybe it needs to be more. Maybe it needs to be more stations where cars can go and get a stage 1, which charges them up a lot quicker. Or require a stage 1 on the really big, apartment complexes or whatever, so you can get in there and quick charge your car, and then another car can come in. But, all in all, it's a good start. I'm all for it. I ride a bicycle. I got an electric bike. We got the plug-in hybrid, and still I got my diesel trucks and, my Jeeps and stuff. And so, I played the whole game. And I'm happy to do it. So, but yeah,
you're on the right track, but we need more bike lanes so I can ride places. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak on this?
Donacar, AJ resident. I was gonna say the only people I ever see riding bikes are the crackheads. And most people don't want to put their bike in a bike rack because of the crackheads stealing them. So, you know, I mean, we need to make AJ a little bit more safe. Anyway, that's all I get to say.
Somebody had to say it. Jane Brown, Val Vista Road. I consider AJ to be the emerald of the valley, on par with Flagstaff and Tucson. Flagstaff and Tucson now require EV charging in each new residential unit. Each residential unit must support EV charging. And they have another reasons for this. And the big complexes also have sand pits because when EV cars catch on fire, it takes like 2 weeks to put the fire out. So you need to have a sand pit. And another thing is if you don't have enough chargers for each unit and people have EV cars, they're going to pull an extension cord out from their garage, which really increases the risk of fire. So I would say rather than just, you know, having them occasionally here and there, put one at each new residential unit and make clusters like you see in Tempe. Make clusters, say, down where Goodwill is, clusters where Fry's are. And maybe do a survey, find out how many people have EVs, are considering EVs, and how many people don't come to AJ because we don't have EV charging. I have more than one friend that won't come out here because the round trip will be too much on her car. Thank you.
We do.
Anyone else?
Nobody uses.
Okay. Any comments from council?
Yeah. Tell your friend we have EV charging stations at the library that nobody ever uses. Who goes to the library? You and I.
Anyone? Okay, now can I get the motion again?
Mayor,
Yes,
I move to continue case P-23-16AM to the Tuesday, September 5th, council.
Second.
moved and seconded, roll call.
Councilmember Heck,
Yes.
Councilmember Cross,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schroeder,
Yes.
Councilmember Nesser,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Soller,
Yes.
Mayor Wilson.
Yes.
Motion passes, Your Honor.
Okay, presentation, discussion, and public hearing, case number P 23-15 AM.
Sorry about that. Good evening, council members. My name is Zuercher Hernandez. I'm a planner on staff. This presentation is for a proposed text amendment to Article 1-7, Parking, Loading, and Circulation Regulations. As you may remember, this proposal has been through several work sessions and a public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Commission, who voted recommendation of approval 5-1. And there was a City Council work session on July 17th. As a reminder, the current city regulations for recreational vehicles limits one recreational vehicle per single-family residential lot and to the side or the rear of the main dwelling. Staff previously recommended, in addition to the existing recreational vehicle limitations, one of the following in a single-family residential lot on 1.25 acres. That would be a horse trailer with integrated living quarters or a motorized recreational vehicle with an integrated horse trailer. Now, there was previous discussion during the work session about what these vehicles would be classified as with the Motor Vehicle Division. Now, staff spoke to the Motor Vehicle Division. What we found was that
Non-motorized vehicles, whether that be a camp trailer, a travel trailer, or a horse trailer, they're registered as trailers. Motorized vehicles like a motorhome or a motorhome with an integrated horse trailer are registered as motor vehicles. Now, different agencies, they classify vehicles differently for different purposes. And the city is consistent with the Arizona Revised Statutes definitions of recreational vehicles. Additionally, staff researched coast compliance cases in the last 3 years. Year to date, there are 84 cases of recreational vehicle code compliance cases. 45 of which involve too many recreational vehicles on a property. 26 cases involve people living in recreational vehicles. Staff is here seeking your guidance on parameters on a possible text amendment. So we'd like information about vehicle type, the parking and storing location of these vehicles, the zoning district, the minimum acreage, and the maximum number of vehicles. Now, staff does understand that this is a city council policy decision, but we do have recommendations. So as previously, staff recommends a horse trailer with living quarters or a motorhome with horse trailer in addition to the existing recreational vehicle limitations to the side or the rear of the home, which already exists, in RSGR, RS54, and RS54M, with a minimum acreage of 1, so 1 acre, for a maximum of 2 recreational vehicles. So as they said before, this item will be heard again September 5th. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions. I do have a comment. I just don't understand why we're looking at this as limiting it to it having an integral horse trailer. Seems to me we just need to increase the number of RVs our people can have on their own property in their name.
Mayor, yes, last meeting, that was brought up. People have a big RV, and then they have a small RV to go hunting or fishing. I agree. If we're gonna let them have 2, they should be allowed to have 2. It doesn't matter if it's a horse motorized vehicle or if it's a regular RV.
Yes.
Your Honor, couple things. One, and I guess I need clarification on this because I'm reading the documents that were provided, the Planning and Zoning Commission Public Hearing Staff Report from June 27th, and it states, page 2, staff recommended against adding or changing definitions as there currently is no limitation on the number of trailers that can be stored on a single-family residential lot. So this says, right now, because I thought we had a limitation of 1, this says there's no limit.
This is for trailers specifically.
I thought-
No,
So-
not RV.
Okay, so we're differentiating, so horse trailers, you can have 10 horse trailers, but you can only have 1 or 2 RVs. But you can have 10 horse trailers,
That's correct.
no matter whether they're integrated living quarters, whatever, as long as they're a horse trailer.
If they do have integrated living quarters, then
Then they
don't.
become this RV.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
that's what I'm trying to clarify, but right now, if you have a 1.25 acre property, you could have 6 horse trailers with non-living quarters on them. Right.
That's correct.
Okay, fine, thank you. Second question I had, one of the things I think, and it was mentioned in here, semi-trailers and semi-trucks. They are all over the place, and I realize these big 18-wheelers, they're tough to navigate around, but a lot of times they just park on a side, on the shoulder of the road on their street. I know that's illegal, but I don't think it's enforced, but where does that fit into this whole or is this the same thing? You could have 6 semis parked in your yard because it's a trailer.
Great question. There is still a maximum weight limit in order to park a semi-trailer on a residential lot.
But they have to be able to park inside on the property itself, either a side or in the rear of the
That's correct.
property.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
I agree with Brian and Bambi. The requirement for having, we're making specific rules to allow for living quarters with horse trailers, yet they're not a heck of a lot different than a person having 2 fifth wheels or a person having a motorhome with another, small tag-along type trailer, one of those bubble trailers that they use for short weekend gigs, running up to the mountains, doing some fishing. I just think that the easiest answer to all of this would be just allow 2 RVs and absolutely, no, they can't use them for living in them. So.
Yes, anyone over here?
I just agree. If we're gonna do it for all RVs. You can have 2 RVs on your property if it matches the 1 acre.
Of course, I disagree. I think 1's enough. I know it seems to be the trend here lately, but if we're coming across 33 people living in these things and let's just throw another one on the property, I just don't quite understand the logic behind just adding more living quarters to property and then also shrinking the size of the property that we're allowing it to be on. But, I mean, majority rules, I'm just putting my 2 cents in there. I feel like 1 should be plenty for anybody.
Want to make a quick comment myself before I ask for or open it up to a public hearing. And that is, you had mentioned that I'll say motorized RV with horse capability. Yes, they do have them, but also in the aspect there's others that have a full-size motorized RV, plus they have the horse trailer that is separate from it that has living quarters. They have 2 different, say, uses of it. When they're traveling around, I'll say, our wonderful summertime, and they're getting out of the valley for it, they'll go up to many different locations throughout the United States and carry, a smaller horse trailer that does not have living quarters on it. They're pulling it with this big full-size RV. So that's just one of the corrections. I want to make sure that we're understanding that there's 2 different activities there, because yes, there is some RVs that have, I'll say, quarters in the back end of it for horses. Also, there's RVs that have, motorized RVs that have the ability to put ATVs in also, which are also classified as an RV as well. So we have 2 different types of, I'll say, accessory uses as well. And then, of course, if it's classified as a toy hauler that's hauling ATVs, and they may look identical to a horse trailer because of the capability of it with living quarters on it, they're classified as an RV as well. And of course, there's different sizes of them. And it's one of the things that I think that, we need to look at the full usages involved on them and make our definitions meet the full requirements of what is what. In fact, I'm not going to point them out as the aspect on it, but I got a telephone call from an individual that has taken a old school bus, has put a brand-new engine into it, a new transmission into it, and has painted it entirely black, including the windows, so you can't see into it, and has completely gutted the inside. It is a full, wonderful RV inside, but it's registered as, really, as a school bus. The only thing is, it's no longer ever used as a school bus. He has the license so that he can do that, drive it, the requirements for it. But, again, we're, I'll say, walking on different types of issues here.
So I will say, as part of this public hearing, that staff would appreciate some guidance on the parameters. I will bring them back up here. If we could get that information, that would be great. Then we can draft an ordinance for the next time we meet.
Okay.
Excuse me, can you jump back a couple slides, please?
That one?
Okay. Never mind. Never mind. Thank you.
Okay,
Mayor?
yes,
Well,
yeah.
yeah.
I was looking to see if anyone else wanted to make a comment, but you want to make a comment?
I just, when we get the direction of staff, just have them look at 2 RVs, whether they're horse RVs or regular RVs, if we're gonna get down this road.
Okay, seeing no other comments, I'm opening it up for public hearing. Would anyone like to speak on this item?
I know.
Hello again. Andre Meek, 1327 South Bel Air, here in AJ. Yes, please change it to 2 RVs, but also, could you drop her down to ½ acre? I'd appreciate it. Now, Vice Mayor, you brought up the thing about living in them. If you had 1, you can't live in it. So if you have 2, you still can't live in it.
Right.
It's against the law. So,
That's being
you know,
followed.
well, but that's, you follow it or not follow it with 1.
Yeah, people put their RVs in storage all the time.
Yes.
There's no
but if
reason
you
they can't
have the-
continue to do so.
You know, that's the thing. You spend for that, you have it parked away, it gets broken into, it happens all the time. And, you know, and I'm looking at, could you move that slide back a couple where it showed the classifications of vehicles? Who runs that? Right there. Okay, it's the non-motorized vehicles registered as trailers, a truck camper. So I'm not quite following that. I have a cab over camper on my truck. How is it registered as a trailer? You don't register the camper. I had it registered in Oregon, but I don't have to register it here. So if it's my daily driver and I happen to have a camper on it, you know, how does that class? Does my shell on my pickup classify as a place I can sleep? So basically, I could live in that on the river all day, all week. So, you know, the parameters are kind of confusing. But, you know, the thing is, too, so I got my camper truck, hitch up the boat, I can go to the lake, but if I want to take the family out and go camping or glamping, whatever, and I want to use a trailer, I can't have a trailer, or I got to store it off site. You know, the whole parameters, the whole way people are now, you know, they've got their toy hauler, then they got their motor home, then they've got, you know, another one, and it's like 20 years ago, whenever these rules were made, you had 1 trailer. You know, you had a camper. But now everything is just, it's changed. I think we need to move up with the times. You know, I believe you should be able to have 2 RVs. Does that mean that if I had a little teardrop, is that a 3rd? You know? And that's the whole thing. A teardrop fit in my garage.
Now, that'd be registered as a trailer.
Yeah.
And we could put trailers,
No,
60
it'd be,
trailers.
you know, they'd probably make it an RV.
Drop is registered as a
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
you know, that's the thing. I really want to see you guys do it where, you know, the rules, if it's an RV, it's an RV. And plus, the classification of RV has to be more clarified. Because, you know, I got told by code enforcement that my 12-foot enclosed trailer with a ramp, you know, my cargo trailer, they said, oh, we can call that an RV. And, you know, it's like, try it. You know, they get ridiculous. You know, why are you picking on me like that? It's not an RV, it's a cargo trailer. I can load up my motorcycles in it, I can throw my sleeping bags in it, and when I get out there, if I set up a cot in it, all of a sudden it's an RV. You know, that ain't fair. So, you know, more clarification, 2 RVs per household, you know, my feeling. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. Come on forward.
Sure you're ready, huh? My cup of tea here. 260 North Zuercher, Apache Junction. 260 North Pinion. These people have been to court 5 times. The judge did nothing, based upon our 2 managers and a DS who said, don't do nothing. Now we got 4 buggies in their front yard, 2 RVs in their front yard, one's a motorhome. Nobody's doing crap about it, okay? So you can come up here with all your laws and rules and explanations, but if you can't get these people to do their job legally, what is the use? The gentleman before me brings up a good point. 2 years ago, came up with $200,000 offer to go through our codes and straighten them out. But you know what? They don't like that. They can't make money. They're gonna piss people off. Oh, we can't have that, okay? So our DS goes and does whatever he wants to do, some of it illegal. Wrong answer. In Newsbreak, they had the weeds.
Your Honor,
I'm getting
point of order.
I'm okay. My throat is really bad, so please bear with me.
We're not addressing weeds.
Well, I am because in it, it says about that.
No, we're not addressing weeds.
Listen, the car there has been there for 2 years. The fence is out of code, but yet they're worried about, you know, 2 motorhomes, two vehicles that store horses may not be able to live in it. You've never been able to live in them, and welcome to AJ, Crackheadville. They do whatever they want to do in case you haven't noticed. Well, guess what? So do the snowbirds. So do everybody else come from every other state. They live in their motorhomes, whether you want them to or not. What is our police department saying? No, code enforcement. Code enforcement, oh no, police. Where's the answer, guys? I think we need to spend that $200,000 and get our codes redone and fire this guy.
George Martinez, 1075 South Cortez Road. I'm back again. I'm like Jason from the movie. Keep coming back. Same thing, I got a citation for having the 2 RVs, which I discussed last time, but I only had 3 minutes to talk, so I made it really short. So once again, I have a toy hauler, and because you mentioned earlier, sir, that you didn't know why somebody would need more than 2. I mentioned it before the other day, I mentioned it again today. I have a toy hauler for my quads, dirt bikes, or my race car, or whatever tools go in it. I have a little 20-footer that we use for just me and my wife and the dogs. That's it. It fits in an area smaller than this right here, 34 foot by, I guess it would be 16 feet, it's in an acre and a quarter. It doesn't bother anybody. I don't know why this is even an issue. I can understand if I had people living in it, but like I was talking to Chip last week, I don't want anybody living in my toy hauler. I don't even like my wife there half the time. So, you know, but another thing is that little
I call it a hunting trailer, which is no longer a hunting trailer because my wife kind of took it over. So now I have little foo-foo pillows, you know, little round things and drapes and stuff in it. You know, how am I going to tell her that she's got to get rid of it? You guys can. I'm not, you know, so and I'm not getting rid of my toy hauler. So yeah, the 2 RV rule, I think, has some merit to it. I can understand once again why this rule was implemented. If you have, you know, 5 RVs and they're rented out, you know, people coming in and out, I could see that, I understand it. But having 2 RVs, now, here's something else. So we have the 2 RVs. We're thinking about getting horses again. That would require a horse trailer. You know, so I could, you know, with that, I can make some concessions and have 1 RV and 1 horse trailer we can use for whatever stuff. But I thank you for at least looking at the ordinance. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Donakari, J resident. There's a reason why people decided to purchase property that, one, didn't have homeowners associations. I know you're the new homeowners association for people who own bigger land, because all the riffraff around town will report you if you do anything wrong, like have a weed out of place. But the thing is that people want to have their toys. They want to be able to go out and play. We do need to change with the times. I mean, I'm worried about the day when you turn around and tell me, because I have a truck, I have a car, I have a motorcycle, I have a go-kart, I have a dirt bike, and you're going to tell me that my land is too small for me having all my toys. But you won't see other than my truck and my car, because I keep them on a porch that are covered by hedges, so you can't see them. But you need to allow people to be able to breathe a little bit and to be able to own their toys. I mean, a lot of people worked hard for them. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Your Honor, oh, I'm sorry. A little more.
Wade Jones, 2975 East 22nd Street, Apache Junction. I'm all for, you know, increasing to at least 2 RVs because, you know, I'm like some of these other people. I've got a motorhome that my wife likes to go out in. We use that when we're going on the road somewhere or something, but I've also have a toy hauler that I can put my quads in and take my sons and we can go out for a weekend, go to the dunes or whatever. And I like them on the property because I've stored them before, they've got damaged, or you can't really see them as well. You have a bad rainstorm and something happens. You don't see them. I want them there on my property so I can see them. I moved out here to AJ so I would have some acreage and I would have a little bit of freedom to keep a few toys and things like that. So I really want you to consider it. I think it's a really good idea. And I don't see what the harm is of being restricted, because that's not what we came out here for, is to have restrictions that really don't make sense. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well,
I think a lot of good points have been made about AJ being individualistic. And the old original code said you could have as many horses as could lay down comfortably. I don't think there should be any limit on how many horse trailers you can have. There's a lot of girls, now I used to be one of them, but your family will have a camper truck to pull the 2-horse trailer, an RV to pull the 6-horse trailer, and now, of course, there's the fancier horse trailers. We didn't have that. We just had a compartment in the front for saddles and stuff. But I think anything that can hold a horse should not be limited at all. And I know that some families are going through hard times, and maybe your niece or your nephew needs to bring their RV to your house to stay for a few months while they get back on their feet. I mean, I think maybe allowing some leeway, and especially when it's lost judgment days, because I have people come and bring their horse trailers and stay with me. So I'll be in violation if I was, you know, looked at, because lost judgment days, a lot of people come here
And so maybe an exemption during that time for any counting of horse trailers. Thank you.
Todd House, 5027 East Hidalgo Street in Apache Junction. Mayor, City Council, I'm just going to bring up 3 different issues that maybe you hadn't thought about or weighed into the consideration. One, look at your code compliance violations now. What's going to happen when you go to 2? Will it increase or decrease? That's what you guys get the decision to make that decision, whether it's going to increase or decrease. I'm going to lean toward it's going to increase, just because of my experience in the area and what we've had to deal with over the last 12 years. Coming up with the county issues on the RV. That's why the county doesn't attack the RV issue, because it's such a highly sensitive issue. There's no doubt about it. 2, you're going to have interface with the county. So county only allows 1. So now you're going to have 2. Then you're going to have some confusion. Is it the city? Is it the county? Which one is it? So I'm just wondering, that may cause a little confusion between the 2, the county and the city. And the last one is the one I think no one thinks about, is there's a little building that some people have spent years and millions of dollars building called U-Haul. You guys all brought it here. Have anybody checked with the storage people and the U-Haul people as to how that's going to affect their business? Because their people are storing those in those units and in the storage facilities right now, and if they can have it at their house, what's that going to do to their businesses? So those are just 3 different kind of other aspects to look at when you're thinking about something like this, because you have an interface with the county, you have code compliance problems, and you have a lot of businesses that depend on people storing things there. So I'm just bringing those up for your consideration. Thank you.
Okay.
Your Honor. I feel like over the last couple times we've talked about this, my message has been lost. It's never been an issue of me saying, oh, people don't need more than 1. It's more the issue of the curb appeal. It's potentially adding to a problem that is a growing issue, in which is people who are living in these motorhomes and these RVs on other people's properties. It exists, it's happening, and it's happening more now than it has over the last few years. And the way I'm trying to come across, and I feel like I may have come across in a way where I act as if, well, why do you need more than 1? But that's not it. And it's more along the lines of, we don't want to contribute to a growing issue. Now, I'm sorry if, the guy with the race car and the toy haulers and the 4-wheelers and the she shed trailer is having an issue keeping more than 1 on his property. It's bigger than that. It's about, we don't want to say, look, now everybody with an acre of land can become, Motel 6, vacancy 2. We don't want to try to contribute to that, and that's been my reasons from the beginning. And it really has nothing to do with the fact that I don't feel like people are entitled to more than 1 recreational vehicle. Thank you.
Your Honor,
Yes.
in regards to, for instance, U-Haul for storing RVs and travel trailers or boats or whatever else you want to store there is made specifically for people that don't have an acre and a quarter of land and don't have the room to put an RV. And there will always be business, and there will always be people that require and need that type of a storage facility. But those that have large lots, there is absolutely no reason why they can't have a couple RVs parked in their lot. I mean, an acre and a quarter, for goodness sakes, unless you have one heck of a huge house, and I don't think we have any of those here in AJ. There's a couple big ones, but they don't take up the whole lot. Anyways, the point being is that I don't think that's going to mess up U-Haul's business at all. On the one slide, you have the different trailers that are registered as trailers. Yes, thank you.
travel trailers are registered as trailers. I beg to differ. I've got a 27-foot travel trailer, and it's registered as an RV. I have to pay annually. I just can't, register at one time and it's done. So I'm not sure where that comes from, but that's my 2 cents on that. Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to give direction to staff to look at the two trailers per lot for 1 acre and clear up what is an RV and travel trailer that Councilmember Cross brought up.
That's my question to Joel is, Joel, when code compliance is doing their job, is it clear enough legally to identify what is okay and what isn't? I mean, has that been an issue with, do you deal with code compliance on that? And that, to identify if they come to you and say this property has this, this, and this, how do you classify these vehicles?
Well, there's certain definitions of what an RV is. But when it comes to courts, if they get to that level, there's never a problem in court. I mean, Rudy could explain to you what the definitions are. And if you want to refine some of the definitions, there's always room to do that. Everybody could poke at any sentence, of course, but
what you're saying is then this isn't identifying whether something is an RV or not an RV or this or that, or some calling it something else semantically. You're saying that's not an issue.
well, in court, you have to prove, if you say, okay, you have 10 RVs, you have to prove that they're RVs, and you got to prove what the code says. So it can become an issue, but if it's extremely clear at the time that the citation was given, that's the date you focus in on.
Your Honor, I'd like Stephanie to come up and talk about this, because I think part of the purpose of this we're going through this whole process. It is hard. Let's get it clear after we're done. So it looks like we're coming to a work session one more time, get this clear, but talk to us about the vehicle types.
Thank you, Brian, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilmember Nesser. So as Erica mentioned in her presentation, a lot of different entities classify these vehicles different ways for different purposes. Staff believes that the best way to provide a threshold is whether the vehicle has living quarters or it doesn't. And once it does, then it's classified as an RV. And that is a way that we could simplify that definition and also gives clear direction for code enforcement to do their job.
So that's probably the most expansive, most flexible, and easy way for us to enforce.
That's why the slide-in camper for the back of a pickup truck, it's not registered for the road, but be still classified as an RV because it has, if you want to call it living quarters, because you got the capability of, you got a restroom,
Yeah.
you got a place,
It's
cook
livable. Yeah.
and sleep in it, but it's a slide-in, it's not registered for the road, it is totally separate, and that would be classified an RV, so that you would have one RV right there.
But then that would go along, then what Darrell said would be correct in that the travel trailers then would not qualify as trailers because they have living accommodations. So they would, I think you'd have to re-examine that list.
Your Honor.
Because they're, even like a park model, to me, a park model is essentially a mobile home.
Yeah.
That's has living accommodations, and yet it's on that list of, this is a trailer, and to me, then, those are all the things that you're permitted to have on your property. And so that is very.
We need to keep looking at it, is what so that we need to keep looking at it.
I think we just need to re-examine that list and make certain that we're, and it makes sense, can you live in it or can you not live in it? And as long as you're doing that, I think that would work, but I don't know if that list necessarily will complement what you're looking at.
Your Honor.
Yes?
This may sound stupid, but what about a day cruiser, or not a day cruiser, but a cabin cruiser boat that's got a kitchen, it's got a toilet, and it's on a trailer going down the road? By your definition, it could be considered an RV.
Your Honor, both the national and the state RV Association and the Arizona Department of Transportation have legal definitions and body types that are on the titles as registered RVs. And I think that they can give you direction,
Okay.
both of those, because they have all that by legal definition. It's in the VIN codes, shows whether it's a living quarter or not, and it's in the titling.
Councilmember Johnson, in our research, we found discrepancies. So the DMV classifies vehicles differently. ARS classifies vehicles differently, and we're more aligned with ARS. So I think what may be benefit for everyone is perhaps provide a list of items or vehicles, and then we could further discuss that probably at our next meeting.
Work session, it sounds like this one.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, we're planning one more work session and then getting real close to being able to vote on it.
Anyone else?
Yeah, let's work on that piece, Sydney.
So this is a public hearing.
We already did the public hearing.
We already
we've
did
held-
public hearing.
we've held.
Yes, that's right.
Your Honor,
I didn't put a check mark by it, sorry.
Your Honor,
Yes,
I move to continue case P 2315 AM to the city council meeting on Tuesday, September 5th, 2023.
Second.
moved and seconded, roll call.
Councilmember Cross,
Yes.
Councilmember Heck,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schroeder,
Yes.
Councilmember Nesser,
Yes.
Councilmember Soller,
Yes.
Mayor Wilson.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, now it's time for the call to the public. I'd like to remind everyone, the call to the public is courtesy and not required by law. It is time for the public to express requests, communications, comments, and suggestions. Requests to speak forms must have been completed and handed to the city clerk before the end of the city manager's report. All issues shall be presented in a professional manner without personal attacks. Under the open meeting law, the council cannot engage in a discussion on an issue presented, but may respond to criticism, may direct staff to follow up with the speaker directly, or place the matter on a future agenda for council discussion. There's a 3-minute limit for each speaker, and I've got several here. Maggie. And what's your last name?
Like I said, don't even give it a whirl, but it's Baritzi, just so.
Britzy, okay.
Just so you all know. All right, so just to start real quick, I got 3 minutes. I just have one ask. Everybody, if you could kind of do your best to clear your minds about what you think you know about the unsheltered community in AJ, okay? So I'm just gonna my objective is merely to introduce a nonprofit that is new to the city and born out of the growing challenge we are facing in relation to the lack of shelter for the most vulnerable in our community, vulnerable to the dangers of living unsheltered in the heat in the summer.
Can I have your address?
2965 West Tonto Street,
Thank you.
AJ. So, what this nonprofit is called is Begin Again Homes. What I'm not doing with this organization, which is me and my board comprised of Terrell Moore, Cheryl Bigelow, and Jeff Mitchell. We are not purporting at this point that we are able to address all the tiers of needed housing solutions for the city. We're starting small and focusing on one select group of unsheltered folks. So right now, the first out the gates mission was to service parents with minor children in their care who are temporarily unsheltered due to economic distress. So that is going to involve a screening process in which, drugs and mental illness are ruled out, not because I or we find any of these people less than, but because we just don't have the capacity at this point to address such issues. So the vision for Begin Again Homes, it came into focus approximately 2 years ago when personally I encountered several families with young children who had become unsheltered due to economic distress, joblessness, or illness
After exploring available resources, troubleshooting several models with County Supervisor Surtee, myself and my board, who I just mentioned, each of whom do not work in the field of homelessness and housing, okay? We're all business owners, we're parents, we're caregivers. This is an issue that organically became pivotal for the BOSA, for all, is this really 1 minute left?
No, yeah, 30 seconds.
Oh, my God, all right. Well, anyway, the model is, it's not a Band-Aid. We are trying to find a location to put people in separate housing structures for a period of time. We will take vouchers. In the meantime, find this location, which I have talked with Patrick Ainsworth, and we're trying to work this out. We are putting people in hotels for gap stays. We've developed a relationship with Motel 6, and it's working. Most recently, we put a veteran up that was waiting on a HUD voucher. The people who do go to the motel need to prove that they have a solution in the near future, a voucher waiting. Again, you know, we're just citizens that are increasingly concerned. I don't have a direct request for you of any form at this point. It's really just to kind of put a bleep in your head so when the time does come that I do have a direct request, we have a direct request. We're not coming out of left field. So again, it's Begin Again Homes. You all have brochures. If you have any questions, I will be in the parking lot in my horse trailer, which I understand is now clearly a place to live. Thank you.
Jane Brown.
I would like you to consider setting up cooling stations, maybe at the Chevron on Idaho, or at Fry's, Goodwill, Horizon, maybe asking them to do something. Horizon Health used to give out water when it was still Health and Wellness, Mountain Health and Wellness. Now they don't. But that's just something I think we need to do, is to make sure people can get cooled off and get water, and maybe those little IV packets of rehydration, whatever they're called, salts. And I wanted to say something too about, when we're talking about the ozone, having two major, potentially international airports within 28 miles of each other creates a ton of pollution. So that is something to think about. I don't know if you're going to tax the airlines for the jet fuel that they burn so that then that jet fuel money can go to buy offsets. I mean, I don't know how we're going to do it. Electronic vehicles help a lot, and they show that you're doing something when you really encourage EVs. But jet fuel is a major pollutant, and you know, we're the only place I've found that has two potentially international airports within 28 miles of each other. Thank you.
Okay. George Martinez. Okay, thank you. Donna Carr.
Donna Carr, AJ resident. I'm going to go back to the ozone problem that guy was talking about in the beginning of the meeting here. One of the things he kept doing was he kept referring to California. Well, they're doing this in California, they're doing this in California. Well, with all these people that are moving here, and yes, I'm going to say it, don't make our Arizona your California, but the fact is that AJ wanted to get bigger, and actually the whole state of Arizona is getting bigger. It's getting a little bit on the crowded side, you ask me. But the airports, yeah. I watch the aircraft flying over low over my house all the time. I think Scottsdale was the one that got something together saying you can't fly over certain parts of Scottsdale because of the pollution that the airplanes leave. And just to say, it's not just cars. For instance, I had a new air condition put in, and when they put it in, I had to call them out the very next day because the temperature was rising in the house, and he says, oh, sorry, we forgot to put the cap on the Freon right, so all the Freon leaked out. And we do have a hole in the ozone layer that does go over Arizona. And yeah, it did drop for a while, probably because we got rid of a lot of the aerosol cans. But when you stop piling more people into the state, and it is a valley, so a lot of the stuff stays down low. I do a lot of hiking. I've been up on the top of Flatiron and can see all the way even past Phoenix. Not anymore. All I see is a lot of haze. So the pollution does need to be taken care of, and yes, we do have some that comes in, and it swings around from California through Nevada down to west. So we do get a lot of pollution from out that way. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is, can you please not turn the original part of AJ into the slum area? I mean, besides the 3-story, 128-bed unit, a drug and alcohol and detox place that's going in, is you got the low-income places going in. And for the lady that was talking about the homeless people is, actually I was talking to a woman over at Goodwill who says she talked to the CEO of Goodwill. And if there's something you need, you can actually write to goodwill.com and they will help you out. And Section 8 housing is supposedly taking effect again. So
Thank you.
Thanks.
George Schroeder?
Me again, George, 2444 West Virginia Street. Recently, yesterday, an article about Apache Junction libraries and other libraries across the country, but mostly in Arizona, are being requested by the Freedom Caucus. You know, all of our religious nutwhacks all in one job, right? They're asking our library to disassociate itself from ERIC, which is a 100-year-old associated needed grid where all of our libraries can navigate and do what they need to do, find what they need to do, national, international, colleges, universities, whatnot. And these people want to disassociate themselves with that so they can come in and teach their own propaganda. I'm telling you, when you hear it, if you haven't saw it yet, please say no. 2, AJ garbage people, residents, if you don't want your garbage can, just don't pay your bill. You have no contract with the city of Apache Junction. You have no contract with the Republic Waste. Just stop paying them. They'll come, they'll take your can. You're never gonna have to pay them. If they take you to court, so what? Let them. It's on them. 2,000 people. They're not gonna prosecute 2,000 people. So stop. Just stop. I'm done with it. Yeah. So go back a little bit. Let's say George has a great day. DS did their job, Code did their job. They sent it to Mr. Ewa about the RVs and whatnot, people living in them. Well, there are a couple of code people who tell them, well, you got to prove it. Well, they take it to court. The judge asks him, well, could you prove they're living in it? Well, they got cords and water hoses and everything else. That's all the windows are out, all the rooms are built out, people coming in and out of it. I think they're living in it, Your Honor. Well, if you can't prove it, we can't do nothing about it. 5 times, same property, 260 North Pinion. I think we got a problem. They don't want to fix this problem. Get it? They don't want to fix it. They never have, and they won't.
Andrew Meek? Andre? Andre.
Andre, he'll get it. He'll get it, Andre.
We'll keep working on him.
He's working on it.
Andre Meek, 1327 South Bel Air. Lot of things covered tonight. A lot of divisiveness, you know. Ozone. Where in the heck do you think paying offsets is going to get rid of ozone? I cannot grasp that concept that, okay, well, I'll buy credits. Of what? You know, it's like this guy over here, okay, so he isn't making the ozone, but you can buy his credits for not making the ozone so you can make the ozone. But or does that alleviate the problem? It doesn't. So, where it's coming from is where you'd have to control it. But so much of it is like not even controllable. It's just where we are. We're too hot, we're too sunny, it's too great a place. Something has to happen to mess it up. And so, I just can't grasp the concept that they present on curing the problem. And, other than, we have cars that are supposed to be smog-free and everything. And it's funny because light rail, if you have light rail that runs on electricity, it's got the cables on top and it's got the skids that pick it up. All them sparks you see? That's ozone. So it's producing it right there. So, that's something that's really, I don't see where we're going to come up with an answer with credits. So, and another thing, on the homeless, they're given vouchers, but there's a lot of places that don't take vouchers. They could, they profit, but it's like they're not going to. So, maybe some kind of press on the people that rent apartments and stuff like that, I don't know, another incentive or whatever to get them to take the vouchers because, get some people off the street. Glad this young lady came up and has a nonprofit that's working towards it. Something has to be done, and there's a little bit of a start. So, and 2 RVs, half acre. Yeah. Good.
Any comments from city council members? Yes?
Yeah. Al, wake up. I'm awake. Can you help me is it Jean in the green sweater? Jane. Don't we have hydration stations in Apache Junction?
Yeah, Cheryl, go ahead.
Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is not, you can't do that at this time, so you can direct the city manager to work with them.
I was just going to ask him if you could.
Right, but you can direct the city manager to do that, but we can't have interaction.
Mayor,
Yes.
I just want to say thank you to the Beginning Again Homes. I want to say thank you. That's private people going out and trying to help the homeless. So that's a positive thing for our city.
Your Honor, one
Yes.
last thing. If we can get an update at our next meeting regarding what we're doing as a city for
Your Honor,
for the homeless.
regarding homeless, right? And I don't know, I'll get with staff and see if we're ready, because there's a couple items we're working on regarding updates. So I'll work if it's next week or the one after.
Okay.
But in the next couple sets, we'll have an update.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. I'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you.